Okay, welcome to our Tuesday, September 20th joint meeting with our Planning Commission. So thank you all for being here. I think I'll have, oh, Lita is back, yay. If you will do a roll call, please.
Mayor Kaylee Clark.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Amy Lamb.
Here.
Councilmember Karen Howe.
Here.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Kent Treen.
Present.
Councilmember Rituja Indapura.
Present.
Councilmember Roshino Farrow.
Present.
And for the commissioners, planning commissioners, we have Commissioner Carrie Boswolf.
Present.
Commissioner Mike Bresco. Commissioner Thorin Labby. Vice Chair Josh Amato.
Here.
Commissioner John Backman.
Here.
Chair Mark Baumann.
Here.
Commissioner Jerry Norman. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think I will have Commissioner Amato, if you don't mind, leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Great, thank you. So next we'll do our land acknowledgement. Councilmember O'Farrell, do you mind doing that one? Just the, yeah, yeah, just that one.
We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Snoqualmie tribe, Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial.
All right, thank you. So next I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, so 7-0, agenda is approved. So next I will hand it off, am I handing off to Kelly? Or, yeah, okay, perfect.
Okay, Mayor, Council, Planning Commission, Kelly Hildy, Deputy Director of Community Development. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that David Pyle is out sick and will not be joining us tonight. In his absence, I will introduce tonight's agenda topic and read the opening remarks that he had planned to give. And I just give you a forewarning, there are a lot. We are here this evening with the Planning Commission and City Council to discuss 3 topics related to the city's periodic update of the comprehensive plan due for completion in December of 2024. Joining me is Evan Fisher, Senior Management Analyst with the city, Jeff Arango with Framework, and Ellen Southard with Site Story Northwest. Before we jump into the comprehensive plan update, I wanted to take a moment and explain why the housing needs assessment topic was removed from this evening's agenda. Housing is a topic that is growing in importance at the national, state, regional, county, and local level. Housing is complex, and we know that the rate, location, and type of housing growth are important to the Sammamish community. To better understand housing in Sammamish, the city has undertaken the development of a housing action plan, funded partly by the Washington State Department of Commerce. The housing needs assessment that was originally planned for review tonight is just one component in developing the housing action plan. Completing a housing needs assessment, or H&A, is difficult as we must consider state, regional, and county requirements while identifying local needs and expectations and meeting funding requirements associated with the grant. The Housing Action Plan grant contract also includes requirements to perform certain levels of public stakeholder outreach to be considered in the H&A, which the City Council opted to enhance by adding a statistically valid survey. The project's public outreach element wrapped up at the end of August. At this point, the team led by the consultant began a review of the community profile and regulatory context, which are necessary steps in the development of H&A, with a final draft due by the consultant in mid-August. Reviewing the draft document provided by the consultant over the past few weeks made it apparent that additional focus was needed on certain elements. The draft housing needs assessment was returned to the consultant, and the document review cycle continued. The staff has been working with the consultant under very short timelines to complete necessary analysis and add pertinent detail. However, the document is not at a status where we feel it is adequately complete and at a point where it is ready to be handed over to the Commission and Council for discussion. Unfortunately, the topic needed to be pulled tonight in favor of presenting a final housing needs assessment at a later date separately to each body, the Commission and Council. We have rescheduled the topic for discussion with the Planning Commission on October 20th and November 8th with the City Council. And we apologize for the inconvenience, as we know that this is an important topic to many. So with that said, we do have a very important topic on tonight's agenda, which is the comp plan update and the public participation program. And there is a lot to go over, so I think we're going to fill our hour with a lot of information and have a really good discussion. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff Arango.
Great. Thank you very much, Kelly. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, Planning Commission members. Pleased to be with you tonight. And let me just pull my presentation up and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay. So you should be seeing a PowerPoint presentation now. And as Kelly said, we have 3 topics to go over tonight. We have the public participation program for the periodic update of the comprehensive plan. We have some thoughts and a proposed strategy to move forward on developing a vision statement and building upon the work that's been completed to date. And then finally, we have some information on a grant program through the Department of Commerce that provides funding in support of periodic updates. And we have a few questions that will follow each of these segments. And then once we're finished with those, we'll go on to the next topic. Okay. So we'd like to start with just a brief overview of the project flowchart for the periodic update. There are several requirements from the state and from the region for how a periodic update is conducted, including public participation, which is the primary topic tonight. Starting over on the left, the first phase is the existing conditions and plan audit. So that's kind of refreshing background information, demographics, integrating things like the housing needs analysis that Kelly just referenced, looking at transportation and all of the various topics. That also includes initial stakeholder outreach, opportunities to build awareness about the project, which is important to get increased engagement during the project. The Joint Planning Commission and Council meeting where we're here tonight. In November, we're planning to do what we're calling a planning summit that would run through the month of November with a variety of activities and opportunities. There'll be a council workshop on visioning in December. And then we're hoping that the culmination of that effort will be the adoption of a resolution, which would include the vision statement and goals for the project, which will help us finalize the scope of work in early January. The second kind of main phase is the land use scenarios. This is where we'll look at, different ways to address community priorities, primarily through the land use element, which is really foundational to the other elements of the plan. So things like the capital facilities element, transportation analysis really build off of the land use scenarios. And this is an opportunity to really explore some different ways of thinking about the future of the city. And it's an opportunity for us to be able to do some technical analysis and be able to communicate to the community what the impacts of those various options are before we get to the selection of a preferred alternative. We'll be meeting with the Planning Commission several times during that phase, and they play a really important part of the process, which we'll talk about in more detail as we move through the presentation. As we get to sort of a preferred land use scenario, then that will allow us to kind of move into the draft plan development and basically feed that preferred alternative into updates to the individual elements. So things like housing and parks and recreation, capital facilities and utilities, all are really based on supporting the land use preferred alternative. There'll be opportunities for input, things like open houses. And then we'll also be looking at ways that we'll want to implement the preferred land use alternative through additional updates to the development regulations and building on some of the previous projects that have happened over the last few years. And again, also working very closely with the Planning Commission during that time. Once we get feedback on the draft plan and make refinements, then we start to move into the final plan and legislative review process, which will include things like formal public noticing, public hearings, things like that, and also looking at developing the implementation aspect of the plan. And that will also include meetings with the Planning Commission as well as the City Council. So now just moving into specifically the public participation program, which is mandated by the state. These are the goals that we've developed for consideration that is in the draft plan that's provided in your packet. So first, we want to achieve broad participation and input in the engagement process. And we really want to make sure that we hold ourselves accountable for doing that. It's simply not acceptable to just invite people into the process. We really have to go out of our way to ensure that we're getting broad participation. And I know Sammamish has been successful on this in past efforts. We want to provide information and resources to inform the public about comprehensive planning and its importance to the city. There's obviously lots of aspects of comprehensive planning that are relatively opaque and confusing, and so we want to be able to communicate that in a relatively simple term so people understand its impact on the future of the city and their lives as residents and stakeholders in the city. We want to reduce barriers to community engagement, and I think there's lots of exciting ways that we can do that through targeted outreach and, frankly, building off some of the engagement tools that we have become much more familiar with during COVID, so that we provide a variety of ways for people to engage. Some may want to show up at a planning commission meeting or participate online. Others may be more amenable to a focus group or participating in the planning summit. We've found that we really want to provide many different ways for people to be involved. We want to have a strong digital presence, certainly, but we want to augment that with in-person activities as well. And we want to, at the end of the day, ensure that the plan reflects public input. And this is really important. We're not just simply trying to check the box, but when we get to the draft plan stage and we're presenting that to the community, we really need to show how their input is reflected in the plan. We also need to understand or communicate, where we've included things in the plan to satisfy state and regional requirements. So it's a bit of a balancing act, but certainly the plan needs to reflect the input that people took the time to provide throughout the process. Inclusive social equity is another really important part of the engagement plan. We want it to be culturally grounded, and use human-centered methodologies. And I should have said in the beginning of the meeting, Ellen Southard from Site Story Northwest is an important partner in this project and will be leading many of the engagement activities. And she's here with us tonight and is available to help answer any questions as well. We want to go beyond, kind of simple basic methods like translation, offer multiple times for interaction, use trusted community messengers where they're already out in the community and have worked with the city before. We want to use, data, census data to be able to target outreach, things like different languages. We also have a tool called My Sidewalk that is something we have purchased at Framework and will be available on this project. And we're currently working on some community profiles around certain topics that we're going to be able to share on the community website so people can have easy access to information about their community, which will help them be more informed and be able to engage around plan priorities. And then there's new requirements for integration and collaboration with tribal sovereign nations. And so we're going to be kicking that off soon and reaching out and developing a framework for collaboration with those entities throughout the planning process. So the public engagement plan is really designed with 4 phases. They somewhat relate to the process diagram that I showed in the beginning of the presentation. Over on the right are the specific kind of requirements and best practices from the Washington State Growth Management Act for public participation programs. But I certainly think the plan that we've crafted based on input and resources provide the city, goes well beyond the minimum requirements. So phase one is relatively brief and essentially is the phase we're in now. And that's really about building awareness and understanding. People have to know about the comp plan, what it is, and opportunities for them to participate. We are close to having completed a branded project website that we'll be launching here in about a week or so by October 1st. That will have lots of information and provide opportunities for people to give input through the website as well. So we're excited about that. Phase two is really the core of the engagement activities. So at this point, people have been given, information, they're aware of the project, and then this is sort of the core of activities kind of before the plan starts to really be developed. So this is things like the planning summit, which I'll describe in a few moments, focus groups, some pop-up events that we'll be hopefully attending, already existing events in the city. Phase three really supports kind of review and feedback on the draft plan. So things like open houses and focus groups, and certainly meetings with the Planning Commission, which can happen in a variety of formats, from kind of more formal briefings to workshop type meetings. And we'll be at that point, of course, accepting feedback on the plan and making refinements before it goes to the review and adoption phase, which is phase four. And again, that's more of the kind of legal requirements that I'm sure the Commission and the Council are familiar with. The Planning Commission will hold hearings and eventually make a recommendation, and then City Council can pick it up from there and have workshop meetings and more formal public hearings, and certainly make revisions at that time as well before it's adopted. And it has to be completed by the end of 2024. So I think the city's in really good shape in terms of the timing. I know there are some cities that are just sort of starting to think about it now. And so I think Sammamish is well positioned compared to some of the other jurisdictions. So some of the engagement opportunities that are included in the plan, and I've referenced some of them already, focus groups and stakeholder interviews. These are opportunities to target specific groups and get them involved in providing input in the plan. We can also work with existing boards and commissions. So I would envision, meeting with the youth board in Sammamish, which I think is fantastic that the city has that already set up. I know there's been a long history or a good record of doing outreach with the schools. And I think, some of the activities that were done during the community visioning project are fantastic. And we certainly want to build upon those. There's lots of events in the city, cultural events and otherwise, that we want to have a presence at. So we're planning to do that in 2023. The project website, which again is a standalone kind of branded website, will be livablesammamish2044.org, and that will be live on October 1st. And again, there'll be lots of background information and ways to contact the project team should people have questions or want to provide input. We want to certainly make sure that we're accessible to the community as we move through the process. Virtual town halls, which are, something that we've done a lot of during COVID, but are really kind of a cost-effective way to engage the community. We're envisioning doing a series of these during the planning summit, and they can be structured around key topics where we're providing information and background, and then kind of fun ways to engage. Like using live polling and opportunities for moderated Q&A and things like that. And then those can be recorded and then shared on the website. So if folks aren't able to attend them live, they'd have an opportunity. We do have some funds to do online surveys, not intended to be statistically valid surveys. And we know that the city has been doing lots of surveys recently. So we're going to be kind of judicious in how we structure that. But we do have some resources to do that. Again, I envision lots of time with the Planning Commission. I think it's fantastic that the city is running hybrid meetings now, which makes it a lot easier for people that maybe not have time to come to an in-person meeting to be able to get on and engage. And then for those that are more comfortable coming in person, being able to do that. So we're really going to, I think, rely heavily and work very closely with the Planning Commission throughout the project, which I think will be fantastic. And then the planning summit, we had sort of gone back and forth on sort of the balance of in-person versus digital engagement. And I think, having done a lot of outreach during COVID and prior, and now as we're sort of coming out of it, we're trying to kind of balance the best of both worlds. And I think for something like a comp plan where you're really wanting to engage the entire community on some level, the population of 70,000 and sort of the resources and expenditures to go and have a 2-hour in-person public meeting, I think you're largely limited to the number of people that can attend in the room. It's fairly costly from a logistics standpoint. And so I think our resources are better spent with a better mix of sort of online and in-person engagement with the Planning Commission, but certainly interested in your feedback on that. And then some of the targeted engagement opportunities like focus groups and things like that, we're more than happy to do those in person, depending on the desires of the group. So we're very flexible on that. And then, holding an open house later in the project, we have some digital tools that we have services for at Framework, where we can do things like online open houses, where if you think about going to an in-person open house where there's boards on certain topics and people are putting sticky notes, you can basically replicate that in a digital format. So if you go and look at the online open house materials, you can see what other people have commented on. You can ask questions, and then it's able to put out information in a variety of formats. And maybe we do, an in-person version of that with the Planning Commission one evening. So definitely some opportunities on that, and we're looking forward to leverage some of the tools that we have to be able to do that. So from a timeline standpoint, this is just kind of highlighting some of the key milestones. So again, we're sort of in the existing conditions and plan audit phase, and that's something we've been working on behind the scenes. There's also a checklist that we need to provide for the Department of Commerce that basically does an assessment of the existing plan relative to statutes. And as I'm sure you're aware, the state laws have changed significantly around certain key topics. So there's likely to be some gaps that we'll need to address. Conducting some of the initial stakeholder outreach meetings, the joint meeting, which is referenced there, and then moving into some of the targeted outreach with focus groups. So be curious if the council or commission have ideas for groups that they think we would be valuable for us to meet with. Anticipating a city council visioning workshop, and then hopefully a resolution on a vision statement. Pop-up events, starting in 2023. And several meetings again with the Planning Commission throughout the project. And you can see down below reference to the Planning Summit. We have already had one kind of larger kickoff with the broader staff team, but there will be a lot of internal coordination that will be key to the success of the project as other teams are working on important topics like housing and transportation and stuff. So lots of coordination needs to happen, and we're appreciative of the staff's efforts to help us with that. And then as we move into 2024, we start to get into the plan review and then the adoption by the end of the year. So the Planning Summit Series is proposed for November. And again, we're proposing a series of events. We anticipate the first being kind of a hybrid kickoff meeting with the Planning Commission, where we kind of introduce the Planning Summit and the project, provide a little bit of background information so people kind of understand what the opportunities are. We anticipate having an event on visioning, and again, not to sort of start from square one, but kind of build upon the past work. The community visioning report is like 660 pages, and there's lots of great information about what the community values. So again, we really want to build off of that, but we'll present some more information on our strategy in the next phase of the presentation. And then we would hold a series of kind of subject-specific events, and we're open to certainly your input. And some of this may depend on the timing with some of these related efforts like the Housing Action Plan and the transportation element work, which will happen under a separate contract. But, some thoughts that we've been discussing would be one on climate change. We are moving forward with the scope of work based on direction from the council to integrate greenhouse gas assessment and ultimately a climate change element and climate action plan. So I think that would be a very exciting topic, and we likely have some data and information at that time that we could share. Housing, of course, is a key topic. Sub-area planning is sort of the concept of looking at not just the town center, but some of the other commercial and mixed use centers and what that might look like, perhaps as something that we could set up with the comprehensive plan. And then these events would include things like live polling, which we use all the time for both in-person and hybrid events. It's a really fun way to engage and produces some really good information. And then all of this would be summarized in an engagement summary report that would be posted on the website and communicated to the City Council and the Planning Commission. So that's our basic outline there, and our internal team has been working on a more detailed agenda for the Planning Summit series. So the project website, which is in development and close to being finished up, these are just some of the major elements. There'll be a comprehensive planning 101 section, which will be background on what a comprehensive plan is and its importance to the community. People can sign up on there for updates. So hopefully we'll get lots of people that can sign up and we can then communicate with them at key milestones. There'll be a blog section where we can provide updates and background information. There'll be a document section where we can host things like the existing conditions report and other relevant pieces as they become available. As I mentioned, we have a subscription to My Sidewalk, which is a web-based tool that makes census and other data really accessible, and we can communicate it through basically these web reports. So we've been working on some profiles on various topics that'll be integrated into the website. We'll still have kind of the longer, more technical existing conditions report, but this is a very accessible way for people to kind of better understand some of the demographics and information in their community. We'll have the project timeline and events page, which will say, when we're going to be at the Planning Commission or when there's a Planning Summit event or focus groups and things like that. And then we have some just general custom emails, info and comment at Livable Sammamish 2044 that people can use to contact us. And those are also shared with city staff who will have access to those as well. So measuring engagement success, as I said earlier, we really want to be accountable. We're not just going to invite people in the process. We really want to go to where they are, make it easy for them. So we'd love to make equitable contact with 10% of the residents and business population. And fortunately, a lot of the online tools like the website and other things, have really good information in terms of the number of people that have been involved and things like that. So again, we want to make sure we're connecting with a diverse selection of the community that represents different groups and be able to report and communicate that back to city elected officials and decision makers. And then we want to integrate integration of the input gathered using things like maps and graphics, identifying patterns, embedded videos, which we can include on the website and things like that. So, really making the engagement process very visible and having, metrics to be able to verify the participation in the process. So that's the end of the presentation portion of the public participation program. And we just have kind of 3 questions we're looking for. Generally, does the update process and timeline make sense? Does the public participation program meet expectations for the City Council and the Planning Commission? And, are there additional community stakeholder groups that should be included in the participation program, or those that we can invite in, as part of the targeted outreach that we'll be doing here pretty soon? So with that, I'll turn it back over and happy to answer questions.
I'll kick off with some questions.
I didn't know if I was running this part. Councilmember Howe, please ask a question.
Well, I just thought I'd give you a pause so that you could
Love
take
it.
control for a moment. Then I wrested away from you.
We are controlled.
Okay.
Yeah.
So number one, this looks like a time-tested template for the ways that you've done things in the past. And what I'm curious about is what are the risks to schedule that you've experienced? I suspect it's probably in public outreach, but would love confirmation on that. And what types of things, how has that impacted your schedule and how has it impacted the budget? So that's one question. The next piece I'll add is other groups for outreach. I know you have our volunteers as different probably subgroups that you reach out to, but we have a large number of nonprofits and other types of organizations besides just the obvious ones. And it's a quick search actually on EIN to be able to look up all the nonprofits in Sammamish, and it's I think those are actually groups that would be worth actually meeting with, depending on their mission statements.
Excellent. We will definitely compile that list and appreciate the guidance there. So a couple thoughts on the first question. I would say that a well-crafted and executed public participation program actually is a benefit typically to the schedule and to the budget because people feel like they're heard in the process. I would say that the development regulations project we recently did with the city, while it didn't have this level of scope in terms of engagement, we did finish that project on time and I think relatively under budget, even though we added a number of meetings with the Planning Commission and to some extent the City Council. So we're a big believer in the public participation process really being the key to the success of the project and building support. And, it's a little bit of an art and science. With that being said, the comprehensive plan touches a lot of different topics, and there are instances where you can't really rush the community process around a key topic, right? So if we're, say, struggling a bit on a key topic and we feel like there needs to be a little bit of an additional public outreach in order to break through that, there is the potential that it could have an impact on the schedule. And I think in that case, I would say that it is worth taking that time because it doesn't really work well to say, well, you may have more input and we don't have a resolution on this, but, we got to stick to the schedule, so we're moving on. I would say that those instances have been relatively rare for us, but, should that happen, I do think it's worth getting it right. And in that case, it might take, my video got shut off. It might make, it would make sense to take the time to get it right and provide some additional input. So that's my thought. I would also say that, sometimes there's other parts of the project where we're under budget. And so we're always first trying to look at the resources we have. And if we can, take resources from another part of the project that maybe didn't require as much effort, oftentimes we're able to do that. It's pretty rare for us to come back and say, hey, we need more budget to complete the same scope of work that we were hired for. I can't really think of those instances. So.
I'll add to that. I can think of one instance, and it's one that we've been grappling with this last year, and that is new state legislation. 2023 is another big year. I think the rumor on the street is climate action planning is going to come back. As we all know, 1099 did not pass. And also there could be more housing requirements. So that's something that's out of our control, but that could impact overall budget and schedule. I hope not schedule, but like Jeff said, I mean, we're very reactive and we have been staying on top of everything. So we hope that we'll can be able to address it and continue to move forward. In this public participation program, what you're seeing here is a draft. Due to instances out of our control, we may have to update it, and we will keep that on the website, on the project website, in form of those changes. So it's fluid at this time, and it should be a fun 2 years.
Well, thank
We'll
you
see
for
what's
that.
coming.
Thank you.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Thank you. At first, I want to mention that I really appreciate being able to connect online, and I'm disappointed that I'm not there in City Hall. And I was, for a roll call, not quite promoted to a panelist, so I hope I get credit for being here. As far as the public participation, one of the goals, and I think this is a theme I've noticed throughout, is about having an informed public. And so, Jeff, in the list of goals for public participation, I would suggest at least thinking about having a goal that says provide education or some sort of like information to the public to enable more informed input. And, that showed up in the basic goals, but I think it actually can show up in some of the deliverables in each of the phases. And so, for example, there's certain rules and regulations that Sammamish must follow. Not everybody knows those and understands those. There's various trade-offs, or plans that are in place related to transportation. Not everybody knows those, or limitations on what we could do because of the school district. So that would help inform the public. And along those same lines, for the planning summit, which looks awesome, but because there's so much that's a challenge related to trade-offs, some of the individual sections, like there was housing, and I think I saw transportation, or maybe you mentioned it. Perhaps there's an opportunity in one of those summits that basically says, how do we put the pieces together, given that there's various constraints and trade-offs that have to be made? So I think that would be helpful. And also I noticed, I think it was the Sammy Bucks or something like that, one of the tools that was mentioned. And having people figure out how you spend money across different needs looks like a really great opportunity. And I would encourage that maybe be emphasized a little bit more, if you will, and could be a tool used within the planning summit. So just some thoughts. As far as the various outreach, I would echo what was said about some of the nonprofits, because they often represent different demographics or segments of the population. And I have to say, I wondered, and the segments look good and natural, whether gender and age and businesses and so forth. But there's also, I'll call them kind of interest segments. So there's the segment that's really environmentally focused. There's a segment that's maybe fiscally focused. There's a segment that would like to see investment in infrastructure and services or things to do. And I think it would be helpful to at least capture, if it's possible. I know this is a tougher segmentation, it really is. But are we getting like a way overweighting on people that are, say, anti-growth or very, fiscally, cautious with tax dollars, or would really like to see, whatever. And it would help us sort through and weight the relative importance. So we like hearing all the comments from those that are, the no growth focus. So. And again, I'm not necessarily suggesting how that's done, but it would help to understand the type of participation we're getting. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, those are all really great suggestions and comments. And I'll just add that I think the opportunity with the comp plan is really to think about how all of these issues are integrated, right? So things like fiscal sustainability is connected to the economic development element, and climate change is impacted by your land use and transportation plans. And so I think, we'll think about ways that we can kind of produce some more integrated thinking and opportunities for people to think about these things holistically. So really appreciate those comments, and we'll definitely integrate that into the plan. Thanks.
Councilmember Ndapure.
Thank you, Mayor. Jeff, a couple questions for you. First one, phase one has a very aggressive timeline. It says from September to October 22. So have you already got a head start on that? How are we doing with that? And does that still seem feasible? Because it's a heavy lift from, all the explanation that's been written in there. And then my second question was about measuring success. I think I saw, 10% equitable contact, and that's the only thing that really stood out. I mean, incorporating, the feedback that you get into the website or the documentation, that didn't really seem to me as we could measure that success. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that. And then 10% is what, around 6,000 people for some members that you would be aiming to contact. Historically, have we ever met that? Because I know in the past, like for the urban forest plan, we've had like a similar website outreach. So I'm just wondering if that seems reasonable and if we've been able to do that in the past.
Yep. All good questions. I'll take the first one, and then I'll ask Ellen to weigh in on the second one, because it's something that we actually discussed in preparation for the meeting. So I think, to your point, phase one, likely will stretch on a little bit beyond what we had envisioned. A lot of phase one is also producing some of the education materials, which we've been doing, and the launch of the website. But there is definitely some overlap. And so I think it does probably make sense to extend phase one for a month or so, so that we can kind of leverage the work that we've done and build that awareness leading up to the planning summit. So appreciate that comment. And then Ellen, would you like to weigh in on some of the metrics?
Sure. So I think just to clarify, that 10% is we're aiming at a 10% participation rate. So our hopes are that 10% of the population, or close to a little over 6,000, will interact with us through the pop-ups, through the surveys, the online work, virtual town halls, and of course, meeting people where they are. So the idea of joining existing community groups and meetings like Rotary and NGOs, your faith community, et cetera. Through that, you can start to reach a critical mass. So that is our goal. We're also going to be using ethnic media so that we have language-specific press. Hopefully, folks will, the language-specific newspapers have been pretty effective in other projects that we've worked on. So those types of things. And then I apologize. I'm in a mountain retreat and my dog is here. So I apologize for the noise in the background. But I mean, every participant counts. So we'll be counting everyone at, like I said, at events and the different online interactions, including social media interactions, which are pretty easy to track. Did that answer your question?
I think it partially does. Is that the only measure? I mean, is that the only specific, way that we can measure our success for all these 4 phases of planning and public outreach? Are we tracking something else as well when we do public outreach or public engagement as part of the comprehensive plan? Are there any other measurements that we're going to have or goals that we've set that we can measure?
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, beyond just the sort of numbers of people that have participated, we frequently track, things like website visits, responses at, questions that were asked with the live polling at the events. If we do an online open house, again, that produces the number of comments that have been provided, and that can be communicated. So I think it's the number of people involved, but it's also sort of the number of sort of inputs that have been provided. We can track, comments that have been submitted through the website, unique website visits and things like that. I mean, those have typically been the metrics that we've used on other projects, understanding that some things are a little bit easier to track than others.
I don't know who was first. Commissioner Bosworth? Oh, sorry. And you, yeah.
Go ahead. Thank you. Some of my comments are kind of redundant because they've been mentioned already. So in the interest of brevity, I won't reiterate what everybody's already said. But my comments are mostly about this 10% goal for public participation. And I just feel that we need to make sure that we are meeting people where they gather, as opposed to expecting people to gather where we meet. So I think of things in Sammamish. Where are our gathering places in Sammamish? So we have all our houses of worship, which would run the gamut from all various backgrounds of people. And I think when we're thinking of open houses and open meetings, that we take the open houses to those places where we can meet people where they gather. I also think we have right here, we have the YMCA Community Centre, and we should definitely be having some form of a meeting in that building also. People are going back to the Y more and more on a daily basis, and I think you will meet people who will be very interested in giving their input and hearing about the comprehensive plan update. And so I think some form of an event at the Sammamish YMCA would be a really great place to go. I also think of the library, which is right here. So these are like the 3 big places where our community meet, and you will get people on various times of the day, various days of the week. So I think you should think about those venues. Then in terms of groups, and you sort of already touched on this, on who you were going to talk to. So, schools, I'm assuming you were going to meet with the Chamber of Commerce, with our senior groups and Sammamish Friends, Rotary, Kiwanis, those kinds of groups. But the other group that doesn't seem to get mentioned, and I know that they're hard to track down, is HOAs. I know it's hard to find who is on a HOA board because they're a very fluctuating board and people change, and sometimes the names and the phone numbers of those groups are out of date and they're not kept very well. But I think there is a register here at the city. I know they endeavour to keep it up to date. I'm on the board of 2 HOAs, and I don't think we've ever been approached by the city for any form of feedback, and have been on boards for several years. So I think that's something worth touching on. And if it's not possible to get in touch with individual HOA boards, maybe the management companies that help them manage their communities, maybe that's the best place to meet people. And some of our communities are part of a master association, so maybe getting in touch with the master association as opposed to all the individual HOA boards. And then companies that manage our apartment buildings and apartment complexes in the city is probably another way to kind of meet people, if that's possible. Because I think trying to reach, I think it's probably more like 7,000 people you'll have to reach 10%, because we're close to, if not over 70,000 at this point with the last census update. So that's a bit of a number. And so I think we have to try every which way we can. But really meeting people where they gather is going to be key, as opposed to expecting people to come to us. I think online is really good, but some people are not really that great with online. And I think some people are tired of online. They're online every day of the week with their job, and the last thing they want to do is get on yet another screen for something else, at least something that they're not being paid to get online for. So I think sometimes if we can meet people in real time and face-to-face, you'll probably get more valuable information, and maybe more nuanced information that way too. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate those.
Commissioner Bosworth here. One measurement I thought of to Council Member Indy Pure's suggestion is asking quickly if people have participated before. Like, so if we're having surveys or events, just kind of do a quick gut check. Have you done this before? First, to see if it's working, if we're meeting new people, and also secondary question to yes is, do you feel heard? Do you feel like your feedback is actually getting implemented in the city? And that might help inform how we do things going forward. I wanted to comment briefly on the website. I think it's not available yet, and I wanted to just share my experience with using city resources and websites. I know that our website's kind of older, but I kind of like it. It's comforting, it's green, it makes me feel official. And I know a lot of our projects are on the Connect Sammamish, and there's a lot of white space around that, and it feels very modern. And so I just feel as I'm doing stuff in the city, I'm bouncing around to all different website types, and I'm never quite sure. I always have to just restart a new search if I want to get back to anything. So if there's a way to make the website feel just a little bit more like our website, maybe that's through color or something, that would be comforting. A few more points. I'm a recent newcomer to just attending in-person things, and I want to say that what fascinated me coming to like the Parks open house was just being able to meet the amazing staff. They were so lovely and nice, and that was just so pleasant. So it's great to have people come in and meet real people. And then as I saw stuff around on the tables, it took me outside of myself. I wasn't there just to comment on what I want. It helped me see, oh, I should think about the children, and I should think about the seniors. And I don't know, it got me excited about thinking about other people, not just what I wanted. And I will do a better job of bringing people to events. I try to direct people to websites, and I try to get them to watch things, and they just don't. So if we have in-person events, I will drive to my neighbor's house and have them get in my car, and I will bring them here. So, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And just to be clear, we love doing in-person outreach and meeting people in the community. That's one of the best parts of this this, our role in the community. So we'll certainly make sure that that's a big part of it.
Councilmember
Great.
Stewart?
Thank you. So I won't harp too much, but I do think there's a big difference between 7,000 comments and 7,000 unique participants. So I don't know if you can really keep track of that. But we do have frequent flyers in our city, and we love our frequent flyers, but we do want to make sure that they don't necessarily have outsized, weighted, voices there. You talk about the schools, but you talk about them like they're monolithic. And when I think about the schools, I think there are many different groups of people at the schools that we need to hear from. We need to hear from the school staff. They're a really important part of our community. They are the biggest employers in our community. And so we need to make sure we have ways of hearing from them in terms of what they need. We need to hear from the parents because, they're probably the taxpayers and the voters. But we really need to hear from the kids. And I know you talked about our Sammamish Youth Board, which is very exciting, but that is just one, I think there are, 24 kids, maybe 27 kids on that. They're great kids, but they're a very small number. And so when I think about the schools, there are so many school organizations and groups that would love to participate if they knew about this, and there'd be ways to really connect with them. So I would love to see us do that. I'd even be willing to help with some of those, but I just think those are the people we really want to hear from. This is a comprehensive plan for the future, and they are in fact the future. So thanks.
Deputy Mayor
Thank you
Lamb?
very much.
I just had a few comments. I think the project timeline looks good, and I really liked and appreciated the pop-up activities that you had shown in the agenda. I like the interactiveness and the opportunity that it affords like younger people and children actually to participate when they are at one of these events. When I'm going through and reading about the pop-up activities, I think they're a really good opportunity as well to be captured on social media. So that's going to lead to my next question is, will there be more of a, comprehensive plan for social media?
Yeah, good question. I'll start, and then Ellen, feel free, or Evan, to add to it. Typically we've used, project-specific information, but use the existing city social media account. So we haven't created like a new account specifically for a project because I think, back to the point about the websites earlier, we want to make sure we're not sending people to two different places. So we definitely want to be very active, particularly around key events and just, kind of building awareness and, connecting people to the website and information and, using it as a way to collect feedback as well. So I think that is kind of our primary method that we would use. And, we've had success using it to promote events on lots of our other projects. And, many cities have very, very active accounts, which is great. And so there's already a fairly, strong audience. And I know that's the case in Sammamish as well.
I was just looking at our city's Instagram site today, and we have about 2,000 followers, which isn't very much. And I was comparing that to Issaquah, and they have like 7,500, which is a lot for a city their size. I think if we're going to talk about measures of success, I think, if we can get more followers, I think that would be a fantastic way to measure success.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So, there's some things that we could do that, like put the social media icons onto the website and then make sure, whenever we're communicating to people, we could put, we could create hashtags and things like that, or whatever the current methods are for getting participation. But yeah, maybe that is another metric that we add in terms of we're always a big believer of using project work to kind of build some sort of larger program. And so if that's to increase the social media following through this project, that would be great. So we'll do some thinking on that. Appreciate the comment.
Okay, I just had one more comment, and I'm taking off my council member hat and putting on my designer hat, and this is me looking through your style guide. I had a question why so the style guide, is it just for this public outreach portion, or is this also part of how the comprehensive plan will be designed, the actual guide?
It would be for, typically it's for both. So it would also be used for the actual document itself.
Okay. So from that, I guess I would reconsider or think about the primary colors that you're using. Pink isn't a brand color for Sammamish. It is primarily green and blue. And just going through the deck that you guys provided, I don't think that it's very readable. And if we're going to talk about putting together a comprehensive guide that is truly readable and accessible to everybody, it just needs to be in a typeface that's not light. I mean, if you look at our current comprehensive plan, it's actually really readable. So I would reconsider like the justified columns that you have and do flush left, ragged right. Sorry to get into like all this designer technical stuff, but I was just looking through it and I just, that's the other part of my, background is design, so I couldn't help myself. But thank you.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that. And, we've worked in communities and with groups that have a very strong design background. So we're actually used to getting this type of feedback. And we really, I would also say that we tend to be a little bit more bold in terms of what we propose for project-specific design elements. But at the end of the day, we want people to love it. We do have some experience creating, accessible documents as well, and we think that's important. So that is just to say we welcome the feedback, and we'll definitely take that to heart and take another look at it.
Thanks, Jeff.
Is it Boffman? Or, yeah, Commissioner Boffman?
Thanks. So just a couple comments, Jeff. One, I echo Councilmember Lamb's comments about social media. I don't hear what sounds to me like a very thorough plan that can be monitored and utilized for social media. And it seems to me that a couple things. One, lacking what I would consider traditional ways of communicating with people in the city. We haven't had a newspaper forever. People just get disconnected. Social media is one of those things that, despite all of its inherent evils, is the one way to connect with people. I also think that, my adultish kids laugh at me when I even use the word Facebook. I think it's important to acknowledge that different age groups and different demographic groups use different tools. And so all of that put together to me seems that we should have a better, more thought out, consistent, monitored plan for how we're going to communicate on social media. Is the intent to use that as a tool or as a connection point? Is it updated on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis? How do we monitor it? Who's responsible? There's just a whole bunch of stuff that goes with that I don't think we've typically done with a lot of the things we do in the city, but I feel like it needs to be better considered. I don't even know what I'm talking about, but I can tell you that, Instagram, TikTok, on and on, right? But those things are the way people communicate now. And if we want to get more than just people like me to participate, then we need to think about a more comprehensive social media plan that survives the whole process, beginning to end. One other small suggestion as a connection point, I think we've mentioned schools more in the context of meetings and gathering input. I do think that, and perhaps this is part of your plan already, just in the details, there are a lot of events that occur at the high schools in particular, and if there's a way to just be there ahead of the football game or the basketball game or the fall musical spring play or the Sammamish Symphony performs at Eastlake or whatever, and just have somebody there with a table that, could answer a question and has a QR code that if somebody was interested, they could connect up with the things that we're doing. I think that might be a place to just, as people are kind of coming and going, there's an awful lot of people in Sammamish that come and go in those settings. And that's maybe a different thing than what you were describing, which was more of a interactive with groups of people. I'm just thinking as a connection point. I haven't seen that done, but it feels like it could be a way to reach quite a few people and give them, especially if there's something they can click on, a lot of people will do that. Oh, and lastly, I caught your comment about doing something to make people show up at planning commission meetings. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Thanks a lot. I think the suggestion about being more intentional on social media is a great one. I like the idea of going to school events, so we just did outreach for another client. We went to the lunch hour for 2 schools, which you might think, maybe you wouldn't get that much participation, but we actually got a ton of participation. One of them was with the mayor. So I think, being able to attend events that are going on are just an easy way to make connections. So we'll take a look at that.
Commissioner Norman?
Thanks for your work. I want to first agree with, excuse me, the Deputy Mayor Lamb on branding. I think that we receive things from the city, if they're colored differently or the font's different, it doesn't look official. And in work that I've done, I found that the big brands, the Fords, the Jeeps, the big companies, they're insistent on sticking with their brand so that as a resident, I would know it's official City of Sammamish communication. So it would not hit the trash can without getting the 3 or 5 seconds that are critical to look at it. And 23,000 households in Sammamish only have one thing in common, and that's that they have an address, so you can mail them something. And so I know some folks think mail is expensive, but I think that we have an obligation to communicate with everybody in the city. And I think that a real official Sammamish envelope, official business, direct mail component with a survey in it, or including a QR code if you want to do it that way, but a way for people to fill out a form and reply would get us, even with a mediocre response, it'd round up 3,000 or 4,000 of the 7,000 responses we need, and they're real because they're people that really live here. The other thing is the water bills and energy bills get sent out all the time, and putting a stuffer in something like that is pennies, because the heavy weight's the postage. And so I think that if we went to those groups as a city and said, let us put our official message in with an official bill, because they're going to open it up, they're going to pay their bill, then I think we could get some effective mileage out of that. And lastly, I have a question. Having been in the direct mail business a long time and buying lists and everybody wants to creepy market and know who you are and what do you want and how can I sell it to you. You want to reach out to different groups that are extremely challenging to identify, race, special economic groups, age, disabilities, gender. Those are things that are typically not publicly available on lists that are purchased. And I wanted to know specifically, how are you going to identify and reach out to those groups? And then, as was just asked by the councilwoman beside me, Rituja, there you go, is that for Matrix, if we took a smaller population segment, I think we need to know how big is that population segment, and then how many of those folks responded, so that we can find out if we are reaching them, versus saying, well, we reached out to everybody and we got 15 old white guys with white hair answered. Well, then how many are here? So unless we know both numbers, the measurement is impossible. So, I'd be glad to spend some time offline and discuss that with you, but it's a challenge. So, then that's it for me. Thanks.
Great. Ellen, can you take that question, please?
Sure. Well, I think we're going to be doing some very targeted outreach to those groups that you mentioned, and I would encourage everyone. I think this group has been sent the draft plan. Is that correct? And beyond this presentation, because we have identified a fair number of groups, and it would be great to hear more. But I think we're all on the same track in terms of the special groups. We're going to be measuring along the way, and we're going to be checking the pulse and redirecting resources if need be, if we're not collecting the right combination of voices along the way. I wanted to go back to a couple of the points about social media too. So we do have a history of doing some fairly robust social media. Folks brought up Instagram and TikTok, which are actually two of the most effective, at least for people between ages 15 and 30. And so we will be looking at how not only do we engage in social media, but also how do we get those groups to retweet and to forward on some of what we might post. So we'll be looking at that as well. And that is very much something that can be done with some of the youth programming, having tweet-a-thons and different social media competitions within those meetings has been really, really effective at getting social media out. And then in terms of the groups, other groups in general, besides youth and social media users, we do plan on going, like I said, going to where people are, turning to social service organizations, turning to the faith community, specific ethnic groups that may have events. Namaste is one of those events. So looking at as many like culturally specific teams as we can. And we're going to need to get that feedback from the city as well as in terms of volunteer groups as well. So that will be all part of how we move forward working with the city to arrive at a more stringent group. But we have the high level in the plan, but we're going to get down into the weeds pretty soon here. Did that answer your question?
It's quite helpful, but as I said, I think identifying those groups is, I'd like to understand how you're going to really get down to the weeds, as you put it, and quantify them, because it's hard. You know, I work every day with the Axiom database. It's got 220 million households in it, and I couldn't pull up those specific things, so I'm curious.
Commissioner Amato?
Thank you. I'm going to kind of double down on what Commissioner Norman was saying, that you mentioned redirecting resources if you aren't hitting your targets, but I didn't see targets there for those communities you mentioned, and so how do we know at what point in the pulse check we need to redirect resources? So going forward, I'd just be curious if we could identify at least a range, and I know it's exceptionally difficult, but how do we know when is the right point to start redirecting resources so we're getting the right numbers of people responding? The other aspect I'm concerned about is that all these engagement opportunities we have, whether we're going to churches or the YMCA or what have you, those are perfect because we're reaching a lot of people see us, but they are also proactive individuals who come up to the booth and engage with the city. And that's a different slice of people than just, it's just a different type of person that comes up and will proactively talk to a government official. So I'm curious what efforts would be taken to reach out to those who are not going to self-select or opt into that sort of communication. Social media is perfect, like the deputy mayor said, for reaching people, but my concern is that if we're not putting money behind social media, we're not reaching people. Organic reach is gone, and we'll end up with some metrics, but I'm concerned they're all going to be vanity metrics, and if we don't have a budget for Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or even Hulu, Roku, YouTube, Spotify, which all have self-serve options with no minimums, then we're not reaching people like we need to. So I'd encourage looking at some paid options. We're talking about a couple $1,000s to be able to do that, not a huge budget hit, but I know that we've got limited funds. So those are my concerns, the metrics for knowing when we need to reallocate resources, getting people who don't opt in to talking to government officials, and then putting money behind any sort of social media outreach.
Thank you.
Commissioner
I appreciate
Backman?
those comments.
Okay, I'm the rookie here.
I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Okay, we've talked a lot about the mechanics the comp plan acknowledges our past and our present and tries to plan for the future. And it feels like we're at one of these really important inflection points in our whole world. My analogy is it's 1998 and we're all on 56K modem dial-up. You know, we couldn't see 5 years in the future what the internet was going to look like. So when you go out and engage with the community, it's going to be more about where we've been and where we are now, or maybe a few dreams in the immediate future. Not that we want to plant something in someone's mind, but how do we talk about transportation in relation to housing, in relation to economic development for the future? So I don't know how you're going to do that, Jeff, but that's my 2 cents for planning future.
I appreciate those comments. I mean, that is always a bit of a challenge, but I think, as you said, the comprehensive plan is the opportunity to really do that. And I think, you know, even just the last few years have been pretty monumental in terms of the shifting, you know, impacts on our lives. And I think that gives us some inspiration to talk about, you know, some of you know, what that looks like going forward. I think, you know, this does coincide with, you know, the 25th anniversary of the city being incorporated. So I think that's kind of an important milestone for the city. And I think, you know, there's always certain uncertainty in the future, but I think, you know, what we can focus on is sort of how we be proactive in trying to create the community that the, you know, residents and other stakeholders would like to see in the future. You know, understanding we have a bit of imperfect foresight, but I think, you know, you hit the nail on the head in terms of some of our challenges, but I think it's also a big opportunity, and, you know, we'll do our best to be able to move that forward as part of the process.
Councilmember Treen?
Yeah, the only other thing that I would just like to add that I haven't heard is, and maybe you were talking about it when you said the business community, but I think there's a very large home-based business homeowners in Sammamish, and so I think you could just look at the records and you'll find out who those people are and be able to reach out to them. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that. That'll be important for the economic development element.
I actually did have a question, and I think we still have 2 more topics, too. Whew. Okay. I was wondering about the name Livable Sammamish. There is something else related, but not related to the city at all, that is called Livable Sammamish. And I just have a tiny concern with that name. Yeah. Josh knows.
We were not aware of that. We did do some research to attempt to see that there wasn't anything similar, but if you had information, we certainly would take a look at it.
Yeah, it's a political committee. Political Action Committee. So I'm just like, that name could definitely fall to a different set of people.
I was doing searches for alternatives to livable today, but I couldn't find anything that was awesome, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, our thinking there, just as in terms of a background, is it's, you know, I think different people probably have different ideas about what a livable city is. And so we kind of thought it was a vehicle to have that conversation with people and kind of as a theme for the outreach process and for the plan itself. We obviously don't want it to be connected to something, you know, else in the community. So we're happy to take a look at that.
Great. I think that is it. Topic number 2.
All right. Back to the presentation here. Share my screen. Okay. So the next piece is talking through a strategy for moving forward with the vision statement. And as I said earlier, kind of building off all the work that's been done to date as part of the community visioning process. And so we'd like to start by just kind of sharing, some of our experience, working with communities to develop vision statements for a variety of types of projects, whether that's a comprehensive plan or a downtown plan, and sort of from our perspective, what we think the important elements are to consider in a vision statement. So I'll just kind of run down through these. It's obviously important to communicate the community values and the identity of the community, what it really thinks is important. It should reflect community input, and fortunately, we have lots of great information on that already from the community visioning process. It should be aspirational, but it should be somewhat grounded in the plan realities. So you should, in our opinion, be able to read the vision statement and have a sense of what the priorities are in the plan, right? And so it's good to say, I think, what the community cares about, but I think it's even better if you can communicate what it plans to sort of actualize through the plan to make that a reality, right? It should be specific to the comprehensive plan in this case, be connected to things like the various elements and topics of the comprehensive plan. It should include some measure of tangible elements that give it meaning. And one of the examples we'll present is an approach that kind of includes as part of the vision statement the 10 big ideas or some way to communicate what the priorities are. It's often, text, and the existing vision statement is text, but we're seeing more and more that it can be communicated through graphics, maps, videos, and other media to kind of make it more interesting. And then, in our experience, developing a vision statement is a bit of an art and a science, right? And I think we certainly have the science piece of it from the community visioning workshop, community visioning project, and the statistically valid survey, which we've spent some time reviewing. So from the community visioning project, these were the 4 identified priorities: improved infrastructure, environmental preservation, improved transportation, parks, recreation, and open space. But we also know that there's other priorities. I also did spend some time reviewing the video from the community goal setting meeting from a couple weeks ago. So I have a list and a summary of the notes of that. And, there were definitely some other topics that were brought up there. And, based on our past work in Sammamish, we know there's other things that the community cares about. And so this was our distillation of the community, I think, value statements that were included in the report. So things like a diverse, inclusive, safe, and walkable community. Obviously, strong connection to the natural environment has always been a strong priority in Sammamish. The tight-knit character, services, cultural events, and retail amenities, transportation options, having a resilient infrastructure and social networks, and then the housing issue in terms of variety, choice, and affordability, which we know is an important topic. So these are all things that we can build on as we start to hone in on a vision statement. So the existing vision statement, this is in the current comp plan, embodies a lot of the priorities that I just stated earlier. But I think in some ways, what for me it's missing is sort of those tangible aspects of sort of what are the big ideas, what are the things that are going to be catalysts for bringing about whatever change is needed to kind of bridge the gap between what the community would like to see and kind of where we are today. So I think there's a lot of themes that can be carried forward, but our recommendation would be to add a little bit more connection to the actual plan itself and what some of the action items might be. I think similarly, the vision statement the proposed vision statement, brings a little bit more specificity to it, but I still think there are some potential themes that I know are important in the community that are not reflected in here. And so I think there are some ways to, again, capture the essence of what are in both the existing and the proposed, but maybe articulate in some different ways. Oh, sorry. So again, based on some of our experience in the community and looking at the goal setting meeting, these are some other things that are, essential parts of the current city planning program that are, I think, not maybe represented as strong as it could be in both the existing and the proposed vision statement. So climate change and resiliency, there are, statements around natural environment and things like that, but really not anything super over on that topic. And we know that that's a priority. Town center, which we know there's various opinions on that, but, it is something that has been in the city's plans for a a while, and we have seen communities through their comprehensive plan, have some reference to the town center. More specificity on transportation and transit options, I think, could perhaps be articulated. Again, are there some big kind of catalyst type changes that we're envisioning here as part of the plan? Some more specificity on housing affordability and types. And again, some of this will feed off of the housing work and the housing needs analysis. Fiscal sustainability, which is also kind of connected to the economic development issue. Parks and recreation, stormwater management, water quality, fish habitat, being a community of lakes. We know this is an important topic. One of the vision statements mentions kind of preserving infrastructure, maintaining infrastructure, but doesn't really mention building infrastructure. And then I think, the last several years have taught us that conditions can change very quickly. We were looking at some of the census data around working from home, and I think from 2019 in Sammamish, it was like 3.7%. And in 2021, which maybe doesn't reflect whatever will be the new reality, it was something like 50-something%. So it'd be interesting to kind of see how that, comes to pass now that we're kind of coming out of the pandemic. But, even for a fairly modest increase could have big implications for our planning program as it relates to transportation and neighborhoods and things like that. So I think one of the questions that I have are, what are some of the big ideas that we're looking for to make the vision statement a reality, and how can we communicate that through this process? So we just put together some examples. Some of these are from our work, and one of the examples is from another project. And again, these are just sort of food for thought of different ways that we could articulate a vision statement. We've been working with the city of Airway Heights, which is just outside of Spokane. It's a small community, but it's, I think, statistically the fastest growing community in Washington. So it's experiencing rapid change. And, there's been a lot of, public outreach and input in terms of what people would really like to see in their community. And so on the left-hand side is their vision statement as it exists prior to our work. And I think it's, fairly similar in terms of the examples from Sammamish. And so we worked with them, again, to carry forward a lot of the values that are still important to them, but articulate it in different ways. And so we did that through a couple of different graphics that we put together. The one on the right has a vision statement in the larger circle, which is kind of similar to what they have today. And then the offshoots are some of the kind of the bigger ideas that they were really looking to make priorities. And these things, in some cases, are very tangible. So they want multi-generational neighborhoods. A big issue there is they're mostly getting, single family homes that are fairly large. And, as people's housing needs change, people are having trouble, staying in the community. So that was something they wanted to articulate. They really want a vibrant and accessible downtown for all. So they don't have a downtown. They've been planning for it. They have a downtown plan they adopted. They wanted to kind of articulate that into the vision statement. A long-term planning goal for them has been to kind of reshape Highway 2, which is major state highway that goes to their community and is on the edge of their planned downtown. They have a specific plan for that they'd like to see implemented. It hasn't happened to date. They want to be able to get anywhere on foot or bike. It's a fairly compact community. They've been building, new infrastructure, and they built this great new recreation center, but it's not accessible by anything other than vehicles. So that was a very tangible thing they wanted to do. They wanted to maintain a community where people know their neighbors and, are very rooted in the community. That's been something that's been an element there for a long time. And they want to be a very family-friendly community. A number of kids, depending on their ages, have to go outside of the community to go to school because they're part of a larger school district. And, eventually they're going to get to a point where hopefully they have another local school. So that was something that they wanted to articulate. And then as part of the vision statement, or as a companion to that, they wanted to include these basically 10 big ideas. And these 10 big ideas, basically the chart on the right-hand side shows where each of these are articulated in the land use element, right? So these are where there's more specific policies and actions to make these things happen. So the data was really interesting, for example, that there's a large number of people that work in Airway Heights and have to travel outside the community to work, and vice versa. So one of their strong priorities is they want to be a place where people can afford to live and work. And they've had some growth in employment. They have, I think, an Amazon facility and some other developments that have been happening. And, they want housing that's sort of matched with the jobs that are there. They want a walkable and bikeable community. They want a full service community. They want their walkable downtown that they've spent a lot of time, planning and getting input from the community. Multi-generational, they want to continue building out their park system. They want high quality education within their city limits. They want Highway 2 to not just be a place to zoom through the community. They want it to be an attractive place that helps support their community and their downtown. And they want to plan and build infrastructure. Unfortunately, they found themselves with their major well contaminated from the nearby Air Force Base. And so they're trying to figure that out in order to be able to grow and meet some of these goals. So they have some really, great opportunities, but also some challenges. And this kind of helped bring forward their vision statement and connect it to some of the plan elements. And then this is just another diagrammatic way that we represented that with the different plan elements and where those ideas sort of live relative to the policies and actions. Another example, recent project, we just released this plan, but this is for the city of Pasco for their downtown plan. This is their first downtown plan. Pasco is a really interesting community. Their downtown is 80% Hispanic, so there's really strong cultural influences there. And so this diagram shows not only their vision statement, which there's a longer version with text, but also connects it to these 4 main goals and specific actions, strategies, and actions that they will utilize to deliver that. And so, starting with their vision statement, they really want a lively and authentic downtown. I think there had been proposals, at some point, do they want to have some sort of theme or something? And I think the community felt like that's really not who they want to be. They want to be lively. They want to be authentic. They want to be connected to their history. They're right near the Columbia River, but you really would never know it. So they want a strong connection there, both physically and sort of experientially. And they want this to be in all ages places for people to enjoy. And so all of that is sort of articulated in those 4 goals and then specific actions that they're going to be working on implementing upon the adoption of the plan. And then this is just another graphic kind of version of that, showing some of the major strategies in the plan, kind of the downtown's place in the region, how that is articulated at sort of the boundary of the downtown plan, and then getting into kind of the core, looking at things like, having a vibrant Main Street and a festival street and building off of the great park that they just redeveloped, all ages bike facilities within their downtown. So again, just some tangible things that kind of connect to their vision for their community. And then this was just kind of a fun sort of cartoonish map, and there's some text that goes with it, but just kind of illustrates, some of the major things like, preserving history. They want more housing downtown. They want more activities and more businesses and things to do. They want it to be walkable, family friendly, more events, all that types of stuff. And again, just another way to kind of connect with the vision statement. And then the last example is not one of ours, but it's for a larger city, and I think I maybe mentioned this at a previous meeting, but it's for Oklahoma City, which I actually did some work there, parking related, several years ago, and they have an amazing sort of planning program. Interestingly enough, I think some organization declared them as one of the most unhealthy cities or something. And so it kickstarted this sort of renaissance in the city. And they've done some amazing things, investing in transportation and a big downtown park and housing. And it's really amazing to see. And so for their, what they call Plan OKC, rather than develop a standard vision statement, they came up with these big ideas. And, these are still somewhat high level, but, they have a 1-page thing that summarizes kind of what's important to them. And these were their priorities that they carry forward in their plan, and is sort of in lieu of a standard vision statement. And then for their elements themselves, they have this kind of cool, branding in, rather than just kind of refer to it as the transportation element or the land use element, they came up with this sort of specific kind of branding elements that are kind of interesting and kind of beyond your standard way to articulate the plan. So we could, do something like this if people saw value in it in terms of how we organize and articulate the individual elements in the plan. So I think with that said, what we would propose in terms of a strategy to move forward with the vision, as I said, building on the prior work, definitely seeking feedback during the planning summit in November, seeking feedback from the Planning Commission and the City Council, and including tonight, looking for ways to communicate the vision statement graphically and connect it to the plan elements, considering refinements potentially as the preferred alternative is selected. We don't know at this point exactly what the preferred land use plan is and necessarily fully the direction of the plan. So there may be some refinements, but with that said, I think there's a lot we can move forward on. We'd be looking to meet with the City Council regarding the visioning on December 13th. I believe that's been scheduled. And then, as I said earlier, looking to adopt a resolution on the vision statement sometime in January as we're sort of confirming the final scoping for the planning effort. So with that, we have a few additional questions. Does the visioning strategy presented seem like a good path forward, and interested in any feedback? Do any of the visioning examples, or if you have other examples that you've seen in other communities, do any of those particularly resonate with you, and looking for any sort of feedback on that? And with that, I'll turn it over for some questions and discussion.
I mean, I think that right there. That's amazing. It's so cute. Yeah.
Actually, that was some artwork that was done as part of the community outreach for the visioning statement. So, that is from a young artist here in Sammamish, submitted. So
Love it. Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I want some windmills and some Amish, so I like that artwork as well. I definitely want to make sure as we do this community visioning that we're incredibly sensitive to the demographics of people who've contributed to the statement, because I know that I don't know if it was a draft statement that you showed, but there were a couple of things about that were a little bit concerning. One is it didn't use the word sustainable anywhere. And, if you speak to any of the youth in our community, if we're planning for the next 20 years, if we're not talking about sustainability, that's hugely problematic. And the other part of that I feel like it could be interpreted many different ways. It said a tight-knit character, and that sounds like the opposite of inclusive to me and welcoming. So I just want to make sure that, again, we understand who we're getting input from, and that we're making sure that we really are creating a vision statement that aligns with our goals, and being inclusive and welcoming is one of our top goals. And I would hope that sustainability, right, being able to maintain the natural environment depends on sustainability, right? I mean, we just had a couple weeks where you couldn't go outside because of the smoke. So let's be responsible. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I just wanted to be clear that proposed vision statement was the outcome of the community visioning project and not something that was developed by our team as a proposal. We just wanted to provide it for context.
I don't know which was. Councilmember Howe, it matters.
Rock, paper, scissors.
It might matter. Actually, I thought that the draft statements from the community were interesting, and I think that there's a lot to flesh out, and so, but I think they're worthy of doing precisely that. I mean, there was certain language that was used, for example, talking about services, and I tend to skew more towards well-run, well-managed, because that hints at fiscal responsibility, as opposed to saying, yeah, we do stuff for people. So I think that, it's going to be language choice as you get there, but I do think that many of the key themes are there. I know that I find myself trying to figure out, how is this city different than any other city? If I were to take this as and overlay it against other cities, it's going to look remarkably similar with the safety components, well-run, well-managed, and so forth. But when I think about the things that set us apart, the people in the community, the fact that we are diverse, I think sets us apart in an interesting way. I also think that our parks are phenomenal and set us apart and become an attractive magnet, actually, for regionally, for people to come visit. You should come here. You should want to come here, because we have something that other people would kill for because of that aspect. So I'm wondering if there's some ways to play it up, because my background's marketing. So that to highlight us as a unique entity in the region by some of the aspects that make us special. So, but I, in general, like the direction that was going, and it's just going to take some serious wordsmithing to smooth it out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bosworth?
Thank you. I, wasn't here for the last vision statement, and I read it, and, there are some things that, I feel like were there, but many that aren't. And so, I think having super inspirational vision statements are awesome, but, if I live here for a very long time and keep having ones and then never meeting them, it just doesn't feel very real. So we definitely need to find a way to have big ideas, but make sure they are cohesive, because there are conflicting things, and also be specific. We care a lot about stormwater, so I don't know if that needs to be in our vision statement, but it comes up a lot. Just quick feedback on a few of the examples you showed. The few that jumped out to me, I love the map. I like that a lot. I think that'd be fun with Sammamish, and it might show explicitly where we're not connected or where we are, or it might show, oh my gosh, we have so amazing parks, and look how many of them we have. And I think that will help with discussion. I also liked the boxes with the pictures, and I think they just had like yeah, because that shows like, the tiles. It can show the parks, but it can also show roads. It also can show buses and houses. So, it just reminds you that it's like all of that next to each other. So I like those two things.
Councilmember O'Farrell?
Thank you. Just, I'm aware of the time, so I'll be brief, but of course my comments are nonetheless extremely important. So just two things on visioning. As a city, we're in the middle of putting together a new DEIB policy, and I think that's something we should keep in mind when we're constructing a vision statement. The DEIB runs through that. I mean, because if we're really serious about that, a vision statement should be front and center with that. The last thing I'd like to say that I didn't see in it was the statement that came from feedback that you got from the public. Very little reference to housing, and I feel like that needs to be there. Something about like optimal housing supply, that very similar to, I think it was Airway Heights, who'd said that they were really interested in having multi-generational housing. Now, I'm just an opinion of one, but I think that's a very interesting thing to say. And so that instead of creating like a city where we have like sections of where this generation lives here and that generation lives over there and never the twain shall meet, that if we're interested in having a community where everybody feels like they have a place, and if we're serious about DEIB, that we create neighborhoods and communities where everybody can live and live throughout the longevity of their life if they so choose. So those are just my comments.
Commissioner Baughman?
So I'm self-aware enough to realize these comments will make me the grumbly guy in the room. I've dealt with a lot of customers over the years who have all kinds of vision statements, and I couldn't tell you what a single one of them says. I realize that it's an important component of what we're doing. I want to encourage caution about not letting the vision statement rule what goes in the comp plan, and vice versa. The vision statement, to me, it feels like brevity equals usefulness, and creating a big giant thing that starts to grow out of control is not going to be useful. Not saying it's not important, but let's make it something that's worthwhile. I would also say that I'd ask you guys to manage all of us, because this is one of those topics that would be very easy for a lot of the folks in this room and others to start to drill down in and then spend extraordinary amounts of time on wordsmithing and all kinds of stuff like that. And really the work I believe that we need to do is in the comp plan, because the comp plan has the details that will lead to changes in code and guidance for what we plan in the future. That's the meat and potatoes. That's where we need to do our work and spend our time. So I just want to be cautious about getting, sidetracked on wordsmithing the vision statement when that's maybe not the highest priority for the work we should do with our limited time and budget.
I don't know who was next. Josh? Yeah. Commissioner Amato?
I'll make it quick. I'm going to be grumpy, just like Commissioner Boffman. I was going to say basically the same thing. This, I feel, is all too long and is pulling the weight of what the goals in the comp plan should be doing and the policies. One of the goals when we started out was that one of the points that was made was that our current vision statement was too long. This one is longer than that one. So at least the draft I saw when we saw it many months ago at the Planning Commission. So I'd like to see it much shorter, not be too prescriptive, and yeah, end of statement.
Deputy Mayor Lamb?
I'm going to contradict the last two commissioners. I appreciate that this is coming back to us. I was not a fan of the proposed vision statement, and I did spend, time reading the first one, like quite a few times. And the one aspect that I do appreciate with the existing vision statement, it is aspirational. I mean, there are words in there that are very like it was chosen in particular, like the words human endeavor, and I think if this is going to live to for decades, there has to be some element of aspiration in it. So to Councilmember Howe's point that there is going to be some wordsmithing involved here, very careful wordsmithing, that we bridge both like being aspirational and somewhat specific. I understand that, and I'm going to put my corporate lens on, in that, most corporations, they have vision statements that are, one or two sentences, and then they have a whole list of value statements, or I think you call them actions and strategies that support how you get to the vision. So, my preference is to find that sweet spot between aspirational and specific, but really kind of drill down in what those big ideas are, that we are much more specific there. We could say economic development, for example, in the vision statement, and then talk about town center in the values or the strategies. Thank you.
Councilmember Treen?
Yeah, so this is a 10-year plan that we'll be working on. Comprehensive plan would then be reassessed at that point. So we need to base it in reality. We don't have a highway. So your examples, Jeff, most of them don't even associate with what's going on here in Sammamish. So I liked what Councilmember Howe said, that we are unique. And if we're going to do a tile system, which seems like it would be fine with me, is that there could be 7 of them, which are the 7 sections of our comp plan, and for sure include shorelines, which would then lake to lake, stream to stream, or stream to lake to stream. That's stormwater, at least a lot of it. It's a much more complex issue than that, but we don't have time to discuss that. So, yeah, base it in reality, keep the statement short, and then the 10 big ideas or 7 big ideas could be developed from that. Again, I want to thank you, Jeff, and the staff for all your work on this vision statement. And I know it's really important. It is the thing that will drive the comp plan and those goals and policies that are in each of the sections. Appreciate all your hard work and look forward to working with the staff and the commission.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So Mayor, the last part of the presentation, Jeff, maybe we can get through that quickly. It is related to the comprehensive plan grant and getting sign off from you on that letter. So if we can hit those slides in quick succession, that'd be amazing.
I got my pen.
Okay, so this is real quick. The Department of Commerce provides grants to cities producing periodic updates. It's non-competitive, but it still does require the submittal of an application. The allocations are based on population size. So Sammamish is eligible for 175,000, and that's split up over a 2-year period, 2023 and 2024. And so there's more information about it on the Department of Commerce website if by chance you're interested. And I think all we're looking for is support for the mayor to sign the letter of support for the grant.
Yes.
Amazing.
I'm seeing a lot of head nods, yes. Well, I just,
Fantastic.
yeah, thank you so much. I know this went over quite a bit from our allocated time, so I want to thank everyone. I also will not be making eye contact with our interim city manager. But I do want to thank everyone for your feedback. I know in July we had a lot of conversations about public participation, and we incorporated that information into this plan. Like I said, it is evolving. It is something that is fluid. So again, thank you so much for the feedback. Heads up, Planning Commission, and there are a lot of comprehensive plan topics coming this fall to you, as well as the City Council. So we're just at the beginning. So ready to get going on this. And again, Jeff, Ellen, and Evan, thank you so much for the presentation tonight. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly, for stepping in too. You had the pleasure of it, I'm sure. Yeah, I really appreciate you being here. So yeah, thank you all. I think we will take a break now for, was it 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. What's the math? 7:30. Okay. 7:30, we'll be back. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone. So next we have our public comment. So we'll start in person here. James Eastman.
And I'm only up here for 3 minutes, and sometimes I go back and I look at the video to see if what I said makes any sense. And I'm amazed at how many times I get up here and what I say is not what I was thinking in my head. And it totally came out wrong. So I think a week or two ago I said I got my tax statement in the mail and it was up like 45%. I didn't mean my taxes were up 45%. I meant my assessed values were up. So that was in regards to the, I think there's going to be, a push is going to come to shove sometime here with the housing supply and our assessed values being way up. But I feel for you guys. You guys get up here and talk for 30 minutes or an hour or a couple hours, and I'm sure a lot of times you mean to say one thing and say another. So I'm very sympathetic, given that it only takes me 3 minutes to screw things up. But I really feel good this meeting we just had with the Planning Commission. I hope we can do more of those meetings. The quality of the information and the comments, I've never seen anything like that here in my probably last 5 years coming to these meetings. I just like, wow, everybody here is great and has really good feedback. One thing that probably didn't come up though in that meeting is we've had probably 2 or 3 of these public outreach events. We had it for the EIS, the TMP, and I think a housing needs survey. So we've had quite a few, and nothing is materialized out of any of those. So I would be cognizant on this comp plan to, I don't know if we acknowledge that people maybe burn out a little bit in doing these sessions and then just having them go away and you never hear about them again. But I just be cognizant in making this a little bit different and actually having some results and outcomes come out of this. And that's all I gotta say. Thanks.
Thank you. We good? Oh, okay, yeah. Carrie?
Good evening, council and residents. Carrie Bosworth, Mamish resident of 4 years. I'm going to go James Eastman style here and just share a story. I've been training a new hire for a couple months, and a few weeks ago, we were struggling with something on her machine. We sort of put it to the side, and she, out of the blue, sent a chat to me and said, I think I'll have my partner look at this. And I looked at that chat. It was the end of the day. I'm like, oh gosh, I got to respond to this because her partner is not a member of our company. And in fact, they are part of a company of our competitor. So I felt an ethical moment to just had to say something. I couldn't pretend that I didn't see it and hope that it never materialized into anything. So I did type back, just want to put this out there, but our policy is not to let non-employees on our machines. And she acknowledged that. If nothing bad was happening, so I didn't feel the need to report it further, but should it ever have come up again, I would have been more than happy to explain what had transpired. So I'll get to my point. I think we're still getting information about our prior city manager. Things are coming out, and they're fairly serious, and I would just like to request once again to release the report and all the facts and findings so that we can understand what happened and move on. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Online.
If you wish to provide public comment, please raise your hand for those online. For those attendees who are joining by phone, please raise your hand by pressing *9. I see that I have one hand raised, and I will promote them to a panelist. Mary Wichter.
Hi, this is Mary Wichter. I live at 408 208th Avenue Northeast in Sammamish, been a resident for 22 years. I wanted to speak to public comment I had sent in for agenda item 12, not 14. It's for the Lewis Thompson Road tight line with the non-motorized improvements. I think it's really been an excellent project. It's at 30% design. We desperately need it for drainage and the non-motorized, so please support both of those. The project is presented or that will be presented by staff and is in the packet, covers the tight line retrofit for stormwater, the new sidewalk on the north side, the marked downhill bike lane, which is 5 feet in width, and the uphill travel lane, which will ensure a 5-foot shoulder for bicyclists per council direction. So thank you for that. The staff said that maintaining the rumble strips, which were proposed, cannot be done under the King County striping contract. So I'm okay with not doing the 4-inch profiled plastic strip, which is kind of bumpy and maybe causes problems when you snowplow. Instead, what I think you should do is paint a 6-inch wide white fog line stripe, which has currently been implemented on Inglewood Hill Road on the uphill shoulder and is also on East Lake Sammamish Parkway. That was done wider this year. And then after implementation of the Lewis Thompson project, monitor it for use and safety, and then revise and respond as necessary and may be most appropriate. And then staff also has on one of their slides that they recommend an asphalt overlay, that it extends all the way over to the south side of the road. That's important for safety and just to keep a smooth, full asphalt pavement surface over the project extent. So I hope you'll all support all that. And you need to get the project implemented by the end of 2024 so that you can get reimbursement for the $3.5 million. With regard to confirming the limits or the extent of the project, The bottom of it, which is the west end, will be at Lewis Thompson Road where the traffic signal is, where it meets East Lake Sammamish Parkway, which is awesome. And thank you for prior councils for having supported doing that so it's fully connected. On the top portion, they've listed that it would go to 210th Place Southeast, which is fine. But if you look, and I sent in a presentation with photos that I took today, there's about 20 feet more for sure, up to 100 feet, where the clogs occur. They occurred this year, they occurred in 2015 and actually caused the $1.3 million landslide, which was very, very dangerous for Lewis Thompson Road. And it's just on the north side ditch. I also believe when David Evans, the surveyors, were doing the surveying, they did, I believe, do 30 feet north, or excuse me, 30 feet uphill from the 210th Place southeast. So I think extending it 20 feet is really needed. We need to get SPW to clean up their stuff there, make sure that that ditch just isn't dangerous, and then it could connect to overflows, which I've also shown other pictures of. So thank you for my 3 minutes. I hope you'll support it, and please extend it at least 20 feet up above 210th Place southeast. Thanks.
Thank you.
We have one more caller that would like to be promoted for speaking. Just one moment, please. Paul Stickney. You're muted.
There we go. Good evening, City Council. It's Paul Stickney, Sammamish here. I'd like to echo what James Eastman said. I was very impressed with the overall, presentations today. And I think the comments by everyone on staff and City Council to a person all spoke their truths and what they thought. I think there's a lot of value in that going forward in the new comp plan process. Also enjoyed some of the examples that Jeff Arango and Framework and the other consultants brought from the other cities. I think there can be some good things there. And I personally think there's a good mix between a fairly brief vision statement and one that is longer, some hybrid that sort of strikes the balance. And I do believe that the vision is important, but I don't think it's everything. I think it's a very important thing, but so are the goals and policies of the comp plan. The only other topic I'd like to mention is that I've said it a couple times, but not to beat a broken record, I'll echo what Carrie Bosworth said. I do believe the facts and findings should come out for public review, especially in light of some of the other information on texts from city managers to council members that we've seen recently that have come out on social media from PRRs. I think the facts and findings would put a lot of that to rest. Appreciate the chance to speak tonight. Have a good meeting.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to give public comment? Please raise your hand. I don't see anyone else raising their hand. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so next we have executive session, potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101I. 15 minutes? Is that right? Okay. Yeah, so we will be back in 15 minutes, and we may take action. Is that correct?
May, optional, yes.
Okay. Following our session. All right, we are back. So next, I will entertain a motion for approval of the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any comments? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, 7-0, consent passes. Sorry. Next, we have our proclamations. Would anyone like to do the National Pollution Prevention Week? I do have it in front of me. If you, oh, you have it? No, I don't. Okay. That's the one. Councilmember Stewart, thank you.
National Pollution Prevention Week. Whereas the United States Environmental Protection Agency acknowledges National Pollution Prevention Week in honor of the United States Congress passing the Pollution Prevention Act in 1990, and whereas the Pollution Prevention Act encourages pollution prevention by reducing or eliminating waste at the source by modifying production processes, promoting the use of non-toxic or less toxic substances, implementing conservation techniques, and reusing materials rather than putting them into the waste stream. And whereas the City Council's environment goal is to protect the natural environment through integrated natural resource management, and whereas King County is a leader in implementing programs that reduce and prevent pollution generated by businesses, residents, and municipal operations by partnering with the community to protect our environment. And whereas these services are provided by a diverse workforce with a variety of backgrounds and experience levels that share a common goal of protecting public health and the environment by reducing or eliminating sources of pollution before they enter our environment, including our wetlands, streams, and lakes, and preventing the need for costly controls and cleanup responses. Now, therefore, Mayor Kaylee Clark, on behalf of the Sammamish City Council, does hereby proclaim the week of September 19 through 25, 2022, as National Pollution Prevention Week.
Great, thank you. So next, we have National Hispanic Heritage Month. Deputy Mayor Lamb.
This is a proclamation for National Hispanic Heritage Month. Whereas National Hispanic Heritage Month is celebrated nationwide from September 15th through October 15th each year. The observation started in 1968 as Hispanic Heritage Week and was expanded by President Ronald Reagan in 1988 to cover the month it is celebrated today. Acknowledging that September 15th is significant because it is the anniversary of the independence for Latin American countries Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. In addition, Mexico and Chile celebrate their Independence Days on September 16th and 18th, respectively. And whereas Latinos are individuals who are descendants from Latin American countries and may speak a variety of different languages, and Hispanics are individuals who speak Spanish and are descendants from Spanish-speaking countries. And whereas Hispanics and Latinos are Washington's largest ethnic minority at 13.7% of the state's population, that's more than 1 million residents, and in Sammamish are 3.2% of our population. And whereas Hispanics and Latinos enrich Washington communities with cultural, educational, and political influences that can be seen and appreciated in all aspects of our life, from skilled workers, artists, professionals, owners of vibrant businesses, and leaders. And whereas during National Hispanic Heritage Month, we affirm that diversity is one of our country's greatest strengths and reminds us that the American identity is a fabric of diverse traditions and stories woven together. Be it further resolved that the Mayor of Sammamish, Kaylee Clark, on behalf of the Sammamish City Council, do hereby proclaim September 15th through October 15th as National Hispanic Heritage Month and urge citizens to observe this month by increasing their awareness of the valuable ways Latinos and Hispanics have contributed to our state and city's prosperity.
Great, thank you so much. So next, we have a public hearing. So I will open up our public hearing for the draft 2023 to 2028 stormwater CIP. And is that Audrey?
Good evening, Mayor Clark. I will be presenting, in council, I will be presenting a very quick overview of the capital plan for you this evening. Bear with me while I pull up a presentation and then we can open the public hearing. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and City Council, and members of the Sammamish community. I am Audrey Starcy, Interim Public Works Director. I will have a very short overview of our prepared capital plan for you this evening before we go ahead and open the public hearing in a few minutes. This capital plan has been an integral piece of our rate study this year. So this was done intentionally so that we essentially have three very important stormwater tracks that we're working through in 2022. One is the budget process, one is the rate study, and the third is the stormwater capital plan. This evening, we have prepared a capital plan based on the enhanced level of service that was selected in the last meeting on September 6th in the rate study presentation. This evening, I'll kind of walk through how to read the plan and our guidebook for that plan. We are very excited to receive any input and comment on the plan, and we plan to close the public hearing on October 4th. To get ready for this plan, we reviewed our comprehensive plan, our 2016 Stormwater Comprehensive Plan, any completed and adopted basin plans, the 2021 Stormwater Retrofit Strategy, any prior capital plans, the adopted 23 through 28 Transportation Capital Improvement Plan. We have a long list of maintenance concerns that are often identified through our inspection program and maintenance program. And we also reviewed all of our drainage complaints and requests that we have received over the last few years. Our draft plan is put together, it looks a little bit different than our prior plans. So this was done intentionally. We tried to place all of our projects that were on our initial list into different programs. This was all based on criteria that was, for each project received criteria that was adopted by Resolution 2018-804. And with that, a lot of these programs kind of follow that same mindset. So each project was placed into a program for your review. Instead of having a very lengthy plan to look at with 100 lines plus, we prepared a guide that is intended to complement that capital plan and really kind of provides the intent and the details for each one of those programs. Also in the guide, you will find the direct correlation to each one of the city goals. And before I move on, just wanted to point out we do have a few items that we're already planning to correct. They are very small, minor errors, but we will follow up with the location of one of the projects, SW 607. We'll follow up with that with the draft plan. And in the guidance document, 609 should read as 608. That's how it's shown in the capital plan. And before you, this is the condensed version of the capital plan. This is the same plan that you found in your agenda packets. It is supporting the enhanced level of service. The only column that is missing is that project description. But again, you'll find the descriptions in your Exhibit 2, the Stormwater Capital Program and Project Guide. And before we open the hearing, I was just going to see if there was any questions on how we developed the capital plan or any of the projects on there.
I think we're all good.
Wonderful. Then I will turn it back over to you, Mayor, to open the hearing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I believe now we can open up the public hearing. Will the first order of business be the public comment? Just wanted to clarify.
Yes, I think we'll do public comment, Mayor,
Cool.
If that works, and then we'll do in the room just like regular, and then online after that.
I appreciate it. Anyone not in that room? Okay, so we will move to if there's anyone online for public comment for this hearing.
Please raise your hand if you'd like to give public comment. I see one hand raised. I've promoted the caller. Mary Wichter?
Hi, this is Mary Wichter, Sammamish for 22 years. I do have comments on the stormwater CIP, particularly related to the colored chart, and I appreciate them doing that and having 50 to 300K and 300K or more. As Audrey Starcy had mentioned, the stormwater 607 should be 12th Avenue flooding at Zaccoos Creek headwaters. It is a Zaccoos CIP number 9, but it's located near the upper end of Lewis Thompson Road and not at Southeast 24th. There may be other projects for Ebright Creek or Pine Lake Creek, so I believe that she's going to have staff look at those, and those would also need to add some SW 600 projects. The other thing is on the photo behind me that you can see, that's flooding from either January or February of this year, where it just streams out and there's really no way to contain it. So that's one of the things that needs to be addressed. So I'd ask that you at least put in a placeholder, an SW-600, to do something there, because that's a gap between when the Lewis Thompson slide occurred and when the Zaccoos Basin Plan was adopted. So that needs to be added. So there may be 1 to 4 items, depending on doing that. Please give direction so that the city manager could ask staff to finalize or look those up and make sure that they're added for the next time that they come up here, because the public hearing will be open till October. Also missing from the flooding, it kind of connects at the bottom of Lewis Thompson Road, but it's not part of the type line. There's actually flooding when you are at the traffic signal and you take a right from Lewis Thompson onto the parkway. There is groundwater seepage that floods and goes to the parkway and carries a lot of pollutants. And if bicycles are there, they splash through it or dive into the lane to get around it. It goes for many months, started about 2016 or 17. That project is Zaccoos CIP number 4 from the Zaccoos Basin Plan. Back in the cost then, as a planning level cost, were about $120,000. And that does need to be added, because when you get that walkway from King County's trail up, you're going to be putting more people there, and it's just really not safe. It does need to get done. And last but not least is the Tamarack drainage issues. Those have been looked at since 2012 and on. There's been many studies, many pages in the document. And the Lewis Thompson project was rated as 65 points, the highest. Tamarack drainage issues was also raised at 65 points, so it is tied for the highest. And now that we're having the Lewis Thompson project tightline done, there might be other ways it can drain through there. So some of the planning level estimates, the lowest I think in the whole plan, are about $400,000, and would be upwards from there, depending on where the solutions are. But this is really important. It's due to development that King County did over the years without drainage or with minimal drainage, and then the city adopted older stormwater code, stuck with it for a long time, and those houses flood downhill people, and we've had maps changed to have the landslide hazard drainage area change. So no more detail on that, but please get those at least 3 things, if not up to 7 of them, done based on what the city staff can study before the next meeting. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
We have one additional caller. I'll promote them right now.
Hello, City Council. Paul Stickney, Sammamish, calling about stormwater CIP. I'd like to suggest that you reconsider the funding and allocations for stormwater 601 on the George Davis Fish passage. And let me give you a few reasons why I think the reconsideration is warranted. In the late 90s, I had a listing, I believe, on Northeast 6th, east of 216th, on a horse-acre lot that backed up to George Davis Creek. And I had a client who was a lot of fun, and I noticed that there was a stream on the property, or at the back, and I wanted to market that in my flyer, and he said, no, there's almost never any water in that stream, and that was about 6 or 7 houses west of 216th. I also had a client in the late 90s who bought a 1-acre lot in the Washington Park subdivision, roughly 6 blocks, or yeah, that's wrong, roughly 3 blocks east of 216th. Nice corner lot. There was a stormwater pond behind his house. I stayed in touch with him. I helped him sell his house up on Union Hill, and he built a new house on that acre site. Helped him sell that house in roughly 2016 or 17. I can't recall exactly the correct year. But he told me there was never any water in the stormwater pond behind his house ever in the 20 years he owned it. In the roadside, swales that were around his house, only water would ever show up if there was major flooding type 50, 100-year storm for a day or two. He and his wife used to like to walk. He was an engineer, a Boeing engineer, and a mountain climber. And I was involved with city stuff at that time. And I asked him, how often do you see water in George Davis Creek over here? He said, almost never. So in my opinion, George Davis is ephemeral, I'll spit it out, up to the point where it goes over the ridge, then it gets to intermittent, then it goes to low flow. So I'm asking, is there enough reach on the reach of George Davis Creek to warrant the nexus of $7.5 million for that level of fish passage area? Maybe there is, but I just want you to know that I have firsthand experience and have never seen any sort of even intermittent flow that is east of 216th. Appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I think it could be wise to, if that's true, we've done a great job for the little red fish on the other streams. That's a large amount of money that could also go to potentially some very much needed retrofit projects. Okay.
I don't see any other hand raised.
All right, thank you. So, do I hand it back to you, Audrey?
Yes, thank you very much. If council, I guess, is interested in providing comment tonight, or we can certainly have comment on October 4th or both nights as well. If not, then I think that's the end of our presentation.
Yeah, I forgot about that part. Council, any questions? Are people's buttons? Okay, I was like, somebody's button is broken. Councilmember Howe.
I do have a question about some of the points that Mary Richter raised, in particular about being north, where that actually the water and the drainage issues start a little higher than we're anticipating actually doing our work. And I remember actually asking a former city manager about seeing if we could survey that at the time, because there were survey crews out working. And apparently that was too expensive, or I was told it was too expensive to add that on. But I would like to know if that was looked at, and do you know what I'm talking about? Because I know I'm not being terribly specific.
Councilmember Howe, that's a great question. I do know what you're talking about, but I think the next presentation with Lewis Thompson Road will have our technical experts on the line and could very much be able to answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
In a much better way than I could. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I just have a couple questions on the spreadsheet where you have $500,000 a year to acquire land for future stormwater facilities as opportunities become available. And then it says, including leveraging the park CIP land acquisition funds. So one, like the description seems to be like, if we need to acquire land, right, as we're building out something, we need to have money there. But the second part of that sounds like where you're proposing we go get the money from?
My understanding of that intent, and that was, this was something that was, SWA was from the 2016 Storm and Surface Water Comprehensive Plan. It did give a range, if I recall correctly, up to $1 million, something that council could certainly take a look at different ranges. For the enhanced level of service with the rate study, we selected 500,000. We can certainly change that amount, but the intent was to acquire stormwater land if we needed to expand or install facilities or protect, I think, critical areas. And I have to go back and reread the intent of that in the comprehensive plan, but that's as I understand it.
Okay, I think we need to have a budget for land acquisition, because when we do stormwater projects, sometimes we have to acquire land. I'm just not sure I want to, approve something that says we're going to go take money from the park CIP here. That doesn't necessarily seem like the right place to put it. So we might want to just...
This would be a separate fund, and I think the idea would be it could be used in conjunction with a parks capital property acquisition fund if we found a piece of property that could meet the qualifications of both of those funding mechanisms.
All right. And then my other question is just out of curiosity. So for the things that you listed as removed from the prior stormwater CIP, the regional stormwater plan, it says it's not a capital improvement. Can you explain that?
Yes, so the plan itself would be considered an operational function of the utility.
Got it.
And not a capital project.
Totally makes sense. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Of course.
All right, council, anyone else? Okay. See you October 4th, but also for the next item of new business.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor, if I could just follow up, I just want to reiterate that I believe we are holding the public hearing open through the October 4th meeting. So I think staff is prepared to take any public comment that comes in during that time and have that reflected in the October 4th meeting. So just wanted to clarify that.
Perfect. And I think last time you made it all in a email PDF, anything you received digitally from the public comments. That was super helpful. Yeah, cool. Thank you. So, new business. Lewis Thompson.
Thank you. Again, Audrey Sarcy, Department of Public Works, and our team is coming on board. We have Jed Ireland, who's one of our senior project managers within the department, and he will be presenting an update to you about Lewis Thompson Road. We will be discussing the 30% design for this project, which is a significant milestone in the design process. Jed will be joined this evening by Maria Paraki with Osborne Consulting, and they are our lead consultants for this project. Whenever you are ready, Maria and Jed, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'll just start sharing my slides. Okay, hopefully that is visible now. So this presentation is Lewis Thompson Road Tightline Project. And the project background is really Lewis Thompson Road is an important way on and off the plateau, of course. It's a collector arterial, and it was a priority project, as Mary Richter said, in the Zacchaeus Basin Plan. And really the tightline element of it, it will address flooding, erosion, and the landslide hazards in this area, and just also the water quality in Zacchaeus Creek. The project goals are improvements to the existing stormwater system. That was a priority. Collecting runoff from the side streets and reducing erosion in the ditches and the existing outfalls. In addition, this was an opportunity to provide non-motorized improvements, including a sidewalk and bike lane on the north side. Council also requested that we look at providing a 5-foot shoulder on the south side and also extend the project to East Lake Sammamish Parkway, one additional block from 205th Avenue to the trail that is being constructed by King County. So by taking the improvements there's no storm drain improvements that we need there currently, but that would allow us to connect to the intersection and the crosswalk that leads down to the trail. Just as a quick recap, this is the alternative 4. This was the preferred alternative that we shared with council. And this one essentially is a standard road section. What's missing, alternative 5, which was not selected, had a planter strip. And in this area, because we're not going to be adding city street lighting, we're going to be using the rural lighting that's on the power poles. And we don't have mailboxes. This is not an amenity that we need. And so it was a way to save cost and also protect the existing steep driveways that are on the corridor. The other element I'll highlight is that King County Parks is working on their phase of the trail, and there'll be a connection, there'll be a ramp at the base of Lewis Thompson Road, taking pedestrians from the crosswalk down to the trail. So that is expected to be constructed this year. So right now we're looking at the 30% design updates. And really with this, what we're asking council to do is just confirm the policy so that the design will go forward and that we can go to the residents with its design and start working out the details. I would mention that a 30% design is really where you nail down the geometrics. You have the geometric limits of where the improvements are going to be for all the disciplines, including right-of-way acquisition, stormwater, traffic, and structures such as retaining walls. So geometrically, we have a great idea of where those are going to go at 30%. And then moving ahead, going forward to 60% design, we'll be looking at all the parameters to finalize those designs to answer all questions. That might mean subsurface reports to get the geotechnical information so that wall systems can be designed, and then also to really nail down the hydraulics for the stormwater system. Long story short, the design concept is confirmed through this process. Our cost estimates have confirmed what we thought about at the 10% design level, which was the preliminary estimate. However, we continue in an environment of extreme price escalation, which I'll get into and explain what the ranges of expected values are forecasted to be. And then just confirming that we have steep driveways. We have 7 driveways that'll be impacted on this, and 6 of them don't meet current standards just because of the topography of the ground. This project is not going to work magic. We're going to work with those owners, though, to enjoy the access that they have and to do what we can to make it work with the widening from the sidewalk. There'll also be a stormwater vault construction. So construction will be interesting. We'll be looking at construction road closures and things like that and discussing that with the public as we get closer towards construction in 2024. We're also looking at a pavement overlay. We're recommending a full overlay rather than just the half-street minimum. And then also I'll just mention the non-motorized improvements. We've already kind of gone over what those improvements are. One thing that Mary Wichter had touched on in her public comments was, in our research, we realized that our striping contract with King County, they don't maintain the profiled plastic striping. The intent was to have something like a rumble strip that would alert motorists when they're leaving the lane. Now, this would be a novel use. Typically, rumble strips are used on undivided highways. And so our ask is that council reconsider this one. We would not recommend it for this project because it's a novel use, and there might be issues with sound and bicycles running on it. And it's not something that we could maintain under our existing procedures. So just for consideration. Other final design considerations as we lead to final design, the construction costs, the inflation forecasts are wild. Private and public entities are looking at, they're estimating up to 15% of inflation year over year for the next 2 years. And that has to do with material shortages, fuel costs, and shipping. So we'll go into the cost estimate a little bit later. There's existing street grades for side streets, but as we're building the pedestrian path, because of the steep grades, we can't, the pedestrian path is going to exceed some ideal standards for Americans with Disabilities Act. It'll be safer and better than what it is now, but we just can't recreate the topography just because it's extreme out here. In addition, existing driveway grades and site distances, we will look at issues that residents have, but we can't fix the topography and the curves as they are because it's a given. And so we have to deal the best we can to not make it worse and improve what we can. I'll highlight that Sammamish Plateau Water has a asbestos concrete water main that's actually right where our storm drain collection needs to be. And it's something we're going to work with them. We're proposing that their relocation and reconstruction of a new pipe, abandoning the old asbestos pipe, would be done as part of our contract. So that would all be done in 2024. So we're coordinating with them on that. And the Water District is also looking at a potential new sewer main that would go in. And so for these reasons, it also speaks to why we would want to do a full overlay. With all the water cuts and the road cuts, it would just make more sense to get the road paved all at one time, since we're investing in it. And it would mean that we don't have one half of the road is 11 years older. You know, it had received an overlay 11 years in the past, then it would be out of phase. This way, the whole road, the corridor would be at the same maintenance interval. And then I've already mentioned that the existing street lighting will be maintained in a rural type on the PSE poles. Now, looking at the estimate, I just wanted to emphasize where the costs are. The total project cost estimate is $7 million here, just looking at the basic information that we presented for the option 4 that council selected. We're recommending an overlay, and so here's the price for that, the price increase. The inflation estimate range for going out to 2024 is pretty extreme. We're looking at between $1 million and $1.8 million. And this is just an unusual environment. And so we're forecasting that the current environment is going to keep continuing into the foreseeable future. Now, we'll see, because we'll know as we look at more bids coming in over the next year where that's headed. We can imagine that it would continue, or that it wouldn't, that it would get better, that the supply chain issues would relax, and that some of these costs would normalize. But anyway, that's the forecast right there. And so we wanted to highlight that. Our grant funding is itemized here. Most of the stormwater improvements are actually going to be paid for by grants, including the American Rescue Plan Act grant, and then also 2 grants from King County Flood Control. And so I'll just highlight this slide with our funding partners. And the next step we're asking is for council just to, are we getting the right project scope? May we continue to have another virtual open house with the residents and to start working through the design issues so that we can accommodate their driveways and their experiences, including site distance and other things on the job. If we get the consent, we will come back with a contract amendment for final engineering design with our designer. And then we would hold a virtual open house probably the end of October is what we're thinking of, with residents to really set the table so they can see the geometric alignment and how it affects their driveways. And then we can start engaging with them on right-of-way issues and access issues. And that is it. I'll just leave it back on this side of next steps. And at this time, are there any questions from council?
All right, thank you. Councilmember Stewart.
Okay, really quickly. I know you talked about we can't do the rumble strips. Did you say you were going to go ahead and move to a 6-inch wide white line?
I didn't say that, but we can add that.
Okay, I like that, just giving a little extra kind of warning and buffer. Is there any way to get sort of cost sharing with the water district? Because it sounds like if there's an asbestos pipe, that's probably something they had planned to do anyway to replace that. So can we do a little cost sharing with the water district?
Absolutely. Our expectation is that they would pay for that. Now, they expect that AC water main has more life into it, so this is not the cycle that they would want to replace it. But we're going to be requesting that they relocate it, put it in its final location, and they would pay for that and share in the cost of the overlay that would be required as part of it. So we haven't started those negotiations, but we've begun to coordinate them.
Excellent. I love cost sharing. And then the last thing is, do we need to do anything special since we can't meet the ADA requirements because of the steep slope? Is there something we need to approve or submit or anything for that?
Yes, I mean, essentially, we have to create paperwork saying that we built it to the maximum extent feasible. So basically, if you're matching the existing street grade and you can't meet the cross slope of 2%, which is a theoretical ideal, then you just have to document that
Okay.
to make sure that it's public information and that it'll be available for audit.
Excellent. I just want to say I'm really excited about this. Thank you for the work here. This is, especially because we're going to get that direct connection to the trail. This, I feel like, just really leads to a lot of connectivity for the city, and it will make it a lot safer for a lot more people. So thank you.
I was just laughing also because we can't see Jed's face. It's just the street. So, Councilmember Howe. Yeah.
Oh, thanks for telling me. Sorry about that.
There you go. Yeah.
I don't know, is it visible now? I don't.
Oh, you're completely visible now. So my question where I jumped the gun, because we were talking about an entirely different subject, so this one is about, are we starting this project at the right place? Does it need to start up the hill just a tad further? I'm thinking about that development that went in that seems, that may or may not be part of the reason why there just seems to be a lot of water that starts up higher than where we're starting the process. And if you could just help me understand where that's going, or is that relevant? And the other question I have around this is, can you give me the lifespan of this project? And the reason why I'm asking is because it is such a high price tag that I think part of just our understanding and even the rest of its understanding is understanding that this is a big price tag that's spread out over 20 years. You know, in terms of the lifespan of the benefit of the project. I think it helps put into context, because that is my favorite word, just why we would even contemplate spending this kind of money on something to make it as close as possible to a complete street.
Okay, yeah, those are big questions. I would say, like, in terms of like the 20-year lifespan, definitely for the overlay, over 20 years, you would expect to do another overlay. The good news is that if we overlay the whole thing now, in 20 years, we're going to be doing another overlay, and it'll be over the whole street. Now, that is very dependent on trucking and how much vibration and deflection is happening. And there's actually a surprising amount of trucks out there because you feel vulnerable when you walk it right now when there's no sidewalks. So I think we'd be in good shape there. In terms of the structures and the storm drains and things like that, maybe Maria could chime in, but I think we're looking at, we designed these things for 75 years or more. This project is not going to have a lot of development or more connections, particularly if Sammamish Plateau puts in the sewer main. If there's a market for it and they realize that they'll have people that will adopt, you're not going to need to cut into the road. There aren't going to be new developments coming in. And you're really taking out the ditches and the erosion and the velocity of the flows that are one of the contributors to the landslides and the sediments that are building up in Zaccoos Creek. So I think there's a lot of longevity in building this project, and I think that's why it was identified as the correct project as Zaccoos Creek. But certainly it's at the bottom, and there are probably additional projects that can be built upstream, including in the neighborhoods.
So you would be looking at upstream as being a different project, related potentially, but a different project.
Correct. Yeah. By building this downstream, it can be connected through other projects that are upstream. And so certainly more projects can be done later. But I think this one, because it's the low point and it's the existing problem with these ditches, this is a priority project. And it's discrete because it's a large project as is. This is already going to be significant and have some road closures putting in these vaults. And so the size of the project makes sense rather than expanding it at this point.
I see. Thank you.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mayor. I just really wanted to look at Mary Wichter's comments that she had emailed into us today, and I'm sure you guys had also received them. But she talked about cleaning the ditch at 210th Place Southeast, and she sent in some pictures about the issues right there. And I just wondered, are we planning on addressing that particular issue? I did like her solution, and Councilmember Stewart touched on it there about the 6-inch wide painting strip as opposed to the rumble line. I just also just wanted to say, I travel that road myself every single day. These days lately, I'm back and forth to Bellevue quite a bit. And this morning at 7 o'clock this morning, climbing up that hill, in front of me were two double tractor and trailers heading up into Sammamish on this road. And then there was a cyclist on the side of the road going up Lewis Thompson as well. And I kind of feared for the cyclist. So I think this is a project that we really need to move forward with. It's been a long time coming, and it's used quite a bit, and we need to make it not to mention for stormwater and all the runoff that happens, but a safer road to travel on for all modes, and that link down to the parkway as well, I think is essential for all our cyclists. So I just wanted to kind of maybe if you could comment on Mary bringing that point up about the ditch at 210th Place Southeast, if that's part of the project.
Yeah, so that comment is well taken. It's understood. I think it would make sense for us to address it. Don't know what the solution would be yet. There's a number of reasons why the existing curb in that location is not catching the water. So there might be one or two solutions that need to be addressed in order to make that function. So with council's consent of extending the limit a little bit to make sure we take care of that specific issue, then we will put that in the scope.
Deputy Mayor Lamb? The road closures, how long do you anticipate this construction to take, and do you anticipate actually needing to close that section of 212?
Maria, I don't know if she's looked at that. I don't know that we have a timeline. It's going to be at least 3 seasons of construction to build this. And when we build in the vaults with the excavation, there's probably going to be a period of days where we're going to need a full road closure. We haven't really looked at that yet, because right now we just have the geometry of where we want the detention vaults to go, but we actually don't have the final dimensions and the type of vaults that we have. But that's something that we're going to have to detail in our meetings with residents.
Mm-hmm. So 3 seasons is 3 years?
It'll be 9 months.
Okay.
It'll be at least 9 months. And Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would probably be on the low end. It could potentially be more than that as well, because this is quite a large project.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments from council? Okay. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I think when I thought 3 seasons, I thought 3 years as well. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds right. I was like, actually, you could do it in a year. Now we're going to hold you to the 9 months. But no, thank you all so much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, next, City Council goal setting retreat follow-up with Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll kick it off while Mike is getting geared up here. This is our follow-up from the initial retreat. And I'm going to turn it over to Mike to have him take it away, but this is the first touch follow-up, and so no decisions tonight, but we're looking for feedback and potentially head nodding from council that we're on the right path here. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Scott, and good evening, council. Again, Mike Suggs, Senior Management Analyst for the City Manager's Office. And as Scott mentioned, we are talking about draft goals this evening as a follow-up from your August 30th goal-setting retreat. And during the retreat, you'll recall that our excellent facilitator, Marilyn Beard, led you through a sticky note exercise where you each shared a few words about your highest priority goals. And after grouping those sticky notes by topic, we found that they could be categorized into kind of 7 common goal areas, which are shown here on the slide. So for each of these 7 areas, staff took council's input and developed draft goal statements, which is what we are here to review and react to tonight. And so our plan is to collect your thoughts on these draft statements, refine them, and then come back to you on October 4th with a final draft for potential adoption via resolution. At the bottom of the slide here is a note acknowledging that council did have a preliminary discussion at the retreat about potential action items that could be taken in support of each of these goal areas. And those initial actions were originally shown in the packet materials, but we pulled them out yesterday just because That piece requires a little bit more input in order to have a meaningful discussion. So we're holding on the actions for tonight and really focusing in on the broader goal statements. And before we jump into those 7 goal statements, I wanted to show this slide as a reminder of where goals fit into the overall strategic planning hierarchy. You may recall that Marilyn presented this graphic during the retreat. And as she noted during the retreat, by talking about goals at the point where we're at, we're doing things a little bit out of sequence, as normally we would start by setting our vision and then working down through the goals, strategic planning, budget allocation, work plan, and so on. But even though we are a little bit out of sequence, the goals that we establish here will still be useful and can help inform that vision statement when the time comes to discuss it during the upcoming comprehensive plan update. And during the near term, having these goals will be great just to provide that direction for the ongoing budget discussions, as well as for the upcoming work plan process. All right, so we will start by looking at the first goal area where council had some common interest, and that was the environment. The 2 most common themes we heard under this area were about protecting the environment and addressing climate change. There were some additional comments as well about supporting parks and recreation and addressing stormwater and drainage. Please keep in mind what we heard section is just a high-level summary. It's not necessarily everything that we discussed during the retreat. So as we go through the next 6 slides, that will just be showing kind of a summary level of the feedback there. So from this, staff drafted the goal that's on your screen, which reads, protect the natural environment and address climate change through development of sustainable practices that ensure a healthy and livable community. So I'll pause here for any feedback on the draft goal statement. Does this capture council's intent? Are there any suggestions? We don't necessarily have to wordsmith tonight, but if council can provide some thoughts, staff can rework those and come back to you on October 4th. So turn it over to the mayor.
Yeah, Councilmember Ndupure.
Thanks. I think my first sort of glance at this one, it says protect our natural environment, which just seems just protecting what we have. And I think through our, for example, like the urban forest plan, our goal is to even increase our tree canopy, protect the environment, protect the trees that we have. So I would like us, I would like that to be reflected as well, as not only do we want to keep what we have, but also enhance and improve on what we have. So I would like to see something like that in this goal.
Councilmember Stewart?
So just to be clear, do you want us to, if we generally agree with the goal, should we just provide feedback in email so we're not spending, it's kind of feels like it's already been a bit of a long night, so.
Yeah, I think it was head nods. Yeah, and Mike, I don't know if it'd be helpful to just go through all the goals instead of doing like individual feedback, or what do you think?
Or do you need it tonight? Like, that's kind of what I want to.
That's a good point. This is very drafty.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll jump in here and take this one from Mike. I think what would be the most helpful at this point is if you all see something that you do not, that does not resonate with you, that would be helpful to hear. I think the challenge of putting things in writing, if you're going to offer us like specific amendments and stuff like that, is that then in all likelihood we'll have to come back and do another round of this same thing. If we're gonna continue to actually wordsmith, only because you all have to collectively agree on what the goal statements are going to be. We're happy to go that road if that's what you'd like to do. Otherwise, we can take your feedback and come back with tonight verbally, and we can come back with some revisions based on that and say, did we hit the mark? And again, we can do as many rounds of this as you would all prefer, but at the end of the day, it has to be something that all of you agree on. So.
All right, I'll just then provide super quick feedback, which is, in general, I agree with this. I feel like it needs to be a little bit broader, to the extent where we say maybe something like we want, to protect and enhance our natural environment and address climate change through sustainable practices and policies, like in all that we do somehow, right? So it's not just about that we have these sustainable practices. It means that every policy we make, every action we take, we have to make sure that it is doing this somehow, in your magic words, Mike. And I would say that, I mean, ensuring a healthy and livable community is fine, but I really think, again, somewhere we have to be more focused on, it's more about having a sustainable future, right? That's really what this is focused on. I think the healthy and livable community is almost implied, so thanks.
Anyone else on this one? Cool. All right, number 2.
All righty. Moving along to our second area where we had some common interest, which was trust and transparency. We heard a lot about obviously increasing trust and transparency in the government, as well as improving our communication and engagement with the public. And from that feedback, we've drafted the goal to read, as shown on your screen here, ensure city government is transparent and builds trust with its diverse community by engaging residents in the decision-making process and promoting understanding of the city's activities through education and clear communication. And once again, we can pause here if there's any council comments.
Looking good.
Excellent. All right, looking at our third goal area under the common safety theme, there was a variety of feedback here, mainly relating to traditional police and fire type public safety, but also in the context of emergency management. So based on the feedback, we drafted the statement on the screen here reading, maintain a high level of public safety through a community-based approach focused on preparedness, prevention of problems, and timely and appropriate responses. Again, we can pause here if there's any feedback.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I love the safety aspect. For some reason, when I read the draft goal, it made me think only about like emergency preparedness, and I think we were intending to be more, I think you say maybe in the prevention of problems, maybe we lead with that and we don't put that one in the middle, because really when I think of public safety, I think of us having, safe routes to school, all of those types of things. It isn't just about like emergency management, but.
Great. Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think for this one, oh, sorry, Councilmember.
Go ahead.
Oh,
You can
okay.
go.
Yeah. Of course, because I am thinking emergency management, but I think that maybe taking out preventions of problems, probably just like, preparedness, prevention, mitigation is like an easy way. Sounds very emergency management-y, but I think probably those would be the top 3, because we don't really respond as a city, if that makes sense. Councilmember Ndapire?
Yeah, I think for me too, like the timely and appropriate responses, that just didn't sit with the whole goal. And I was just like, is that specific? Because for me, that was also part of like our building our trust in government, because that's what we had, I thought, discussed. So that just doesn't feel right here. Maybe we need to wordsmith this again. So thanks.
Definitely. Councilmember Treen?
Yeah, so I would agree on the change of the 3 words. But under this timely and appropriate responses, I think you kind of going where Councilmember Stewart was headed, that it's got to be a little broader, that is how we actually I think it's how we get rated on our response times with our emergency responses, fire and police. So if that was the intent of this 4-word phrase, to include that we have, and what we're saying is I've got a top-notch fire department, top-notch police department, and we respond to problems, challenges, which is what they do. So if that, I think this one needs some wordsmithing, but if that was the intent there, I would not remove it. I'd leave that in as well, but word it in such a way so that it's reflecting our police and fire. Thank you.
Councilmember Howe?
The question I have around this one is, this is very focused, it appears on external resources coming to bear during an emergency or something difficult, but it doesn't speak to the city itself responding, like us, like in a time of emergency or crisis. Are we timely? Are we efficient? Are we, in the moment and able to offer assistance and render aid appropriately? So I'm wondering, should this be broad enough to include city government in terms of being proactive or active, or are we limiting it to the external sources that we contract? That's a question.
Councilmember O'Farrell?
Yeah, I take Councilmember Howe's point, because if we're looking at that line above where it says what we heard, and there is a bullet point there on public engagement, which is not really reflected in the sentence. So to what Councilmember Howe is saying, so in the middle of maybe say a public safety situation where it's a natural disaster or whatever, how do we react to it? How do we engage the public? How do we come to their aid? How do we provide, or what can we provide, and how are we going to do that? Especially in times where we have high temperatures in the summertime, when it's triple-digit temperatures outside. What do we do, and how do we engage the public to let them know that we're here for them? That kind of thing, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. So, Mike, I think even I can work with you too, because, like the city, we are not a responding agency, but to Councilmember Treen's point, we do have amazing police and fire. So I think that preparedness, prevention, mitigation, and then we could either talk about our public safety, because we do have a high level of it. But that will be a comebacker, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Looks like Councilmember DeFleury has a question.
Oh, yep, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I think for me, in the what we heard, resiliency is a really big part. And I think, to what others have said, how do we build a resilient community? I think that is also very important. It's like, yes, what is the city doing, but how are we also preparing our citizens? So I think that can also be potentially reflected in this. So thanks.
All right. A lot of really great feedback. This is exactly what we were looking for. So we'll spend a little time on this one and bring it back to you on the 4th. Consistent with Council's commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, DEIB came through as a clear goal area during the retreat. And the feedback we heard generally related to promoting DEIB across the board, both in the community as well as in internal functions. So the draft goal here reads, promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging throughout the community and in all aspects of city government. So that's a pretty broad one there. And I will pause. I see a few hands up if there's any feedback here.
Councilmember Howe.
Just briefly, if we could add measurement as part of this, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lamb.
Can we add more specifics to all aspects of city government? It seems a little unclear to me. It's we could include policy, decision making. It's things that we build. Just an equity lens. Thank you.
Councilmember Indapuri.
I think for me, I would like to see some other word other than just promote. It puts the onus on somebody else to just do it. And I think we need to really, again, it starts from within. And so I would love to see a different word which says, it's not just promoting, right? It's practicing, it's teaching, it's learning. So maybe some other word there. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Regarding housing, we heard a lot of support for affordable housing and increasing the availability of housing types. This translated into the draft goal statement here, reading, facilitate the development and preservation of housing that meets a diverse range of incomes and needs. And I'll pause for feedback.
Deputy Mayor, was that hand from before? No, it's okay. Do you have anything? Okay. Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah. Mike, I know you're trying to be really succinct with your words, and I appreciate that. I just feel like the word needs doesn't quite, right, cover the diversity that we're looking, or for me, right? I think what we're getting at is we want to facilitate and preservation of how, right, to have housing for all of the diverse, I don't have a better word, but I feel like it needs to. Life cycle. Yeah, maybe life cycle, because it isn't just about income, it's about life cycle, it's about abilities, it's about all of that other kinds of diversity. And I do think the word needs probably covers it, but it's just such a generic word. I'm hoping we could find something a little more descriptive there, if we could. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Stewart. There were a few specific examples of the types of needs called out during the retreat. So I'll go back and look at the notes and make sure that we capture those and any others that might be kind of fall under that needs definition.
Yeah, I mean, we might, yeah, just all the needs. All the needs.
Councilmember Indapire?
Yeah. Mike, help me, please refresh my memory on what the preservation of housing means, because maybe I didn't quite catch it when we were going through the exercise. What does that mean, preservation of housing, in relation to this goal?
So that is, I think that's kind of a nod to, I was talking with our community development director about, there was an update in 2021 to state law, and under the Growth Management Act housing goal, it talks about planning for and accommodating affordable housing, as well as densities and differing housing types. And then also the third piece of that was to preserve existing housing. So I think that piece is more about kind of preserving, for example, if there is low-income housing in the community, that stays low income and remains available, is not converted.
So is that specific to that kind of housing, the preservation, to like if we have a Section 8 or if we have, other housing for low-income people? Does that preservation of housing just mean that kind of housing, or it can also mean some other kinds of housing?
I think it could mean, any types of housing that we're defining under the needs. So making sure that the types of housing that meet that diverse range of needs remains preserved in the city. That's kind of how I read that.
Deputy Mayor Lamb?
I guess I'd be a little concerned with the word preservation, because it sounds like if we need to make a zoning change, for instance, we wouldn't be able to do that.
Councilmember Trine?
Yeah, I think preservation is also, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Suggs, is that we actually get to keep our homes and live in that home for the remainder of our life, if we so choose so. To remove family homes or to take away someone's ranch or horse house and barn, that what we're saying is there are certain parts of our city, we need to preserve them. They need to stay the way they are, because that is part of our housing, and it does meet the needs of those people. And then when they do pass, it will meet the needs of somebody who's similar to that. So it's not about this. I don't think this is, but I don't think this is about so much upzoning places. It's about how do we preserve the character of Sammamish with the housing types that we have here now, and then with the idea that moving forward there'd be changes that might be necessary to meet the needs of this diverse range of incomes or lack of income. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lamb?
I would disagree with Councilmember Trine. To me, using the word preservation doesn't sound very equitable.
It's in the Growth Management Act, so it is equitable. It allows people to stay in their homes.
Well, perhaps we can find a different word.
Yeah, so Mike, I mean, yeah, I think this one kind of plays to a lot of different things. So maybe this one and maybe a couple other examples, we can maybe choose one, like keep this as a goal, bring up a couple more, maybe we could decide.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can rework this one and also check in with our community development department as they are working on the housing action plan, and they may have some ideas of how we can accomplish kind of the language a balance of language that council's looking for here.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Councilmember O'Farrell?
I just think that the term, I've heard it before in other contexts, the preservation of housing stock, and I think it means a lot of different things. It's not necessarily a housing zoning thing. I think it means that especially older homes in a particular municipality, as they age, that housing stock is preserved and that it can be sold and resold, and that it's not allowed, first of all, to fall into disrepair. Or maybe if you have somebody who's living in this home and it used to be the family home, but now they're there by themselves, they're empty nesters, and how can they continue to stay in their home? Maybe the house is fully paid off, but the property taxes are enormous and they no longer can stay there because they're on a fixed income. So maybe it's the municipality or the jurisdiction having some kind of property tax subsidies that are for people on fixed incomes and seniors. So I think it kind of applies in different ways and means different things, and it's part of a housing strategy to not only continue to grow and build new types of housing, but to maintain the current housing stock as it is, so that older parts of your jurisdiction don't fall into disrepair. And there are lots of policies around that can help with that. And of course, I can't answer any of those questions, and I can't tell you what those policies are. But it is a phrase, and it is kind of a something I've heard in relation to housing stock management, and it probably would be educational for all of us to kind of find out a little bit more about what that exactly means, and maybe that would help enlighten the conversation.
Okay. All right. Yes, Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may, I just want to remind council that this was the one that we did not actually get very far with at the retreat for this very reason. And so if I might suggest that perhaps council could settle on a fairly high level statement recognizing that we are about to move into some fairly intensive work regarding around the housing action plan and other work leading into the comp plan, and to hit a very high level about what you want to potentially have happen with housing, knowing that there's a lot more work to come, and defining some of these things. The more words you put in the sentence, the more it can be picked apart, as you all have proven tonight. And so we were aiming for something that kind of that hits all the marks, and then you all can, as we continue on, continue to refine down the specifics of that, perhaps underneath when we get to the action items and things like that. So just a thought for you all.
Yeah, let's just do facilitate housing. Just remove.
Period.
Yeah. Oh, Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, so Scott, thank you. On that note, what if we instead change the goal to say that we would ensure that our housing supported all of the other goals, right? Something along those lines. So we don't have to put a lot of specific words. We can say that we ensure that we have housing to support our diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, sustainability goals to meet the needs of our community, right, today and in the future, something like that. So it's a little more generic. We don't get into specific things, but we make sure that the housing supports all the other things we're trying to do. Because we really, if people can't live here, we can do all that other stuff, but they have no place to live, kind of moot.
Thank you, Councilmember. We'll take a stab at something magical like that and see what we can come up with. Yeah, well, somewhere in there's a sweet spot that I think council, again, recognizing that there's a lot of work yet to come in the fairly near future on this topic, that this doesn't have to be the end-all, be-all at the moment. I think we recognize that housing overall is an important issue for all of you. And so I think in some measure, right at this moment, that's the critical piece. And then there's a lot of work more to come on that. If there's nothing more on that, I would ask Mike to continue on.
Yeah, all good. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. 6 of 7 goal here. There's a lot of interest during the retreat in having financial sustainability be one of council's goals. And consistent with that, we have a draft statement here reading, ensure long-term financial sustainability through efficient and effective government services funded by diverse revenue sources. Pausing for feedback.
Councilmember Napuri?
Maybe predictable sources of revenues too, so maybe diverse and predictable revenue sources.
Looks good.
Fantastic. And last but not least, oops, there we go. Under the transportation area, we drafted a goal reading, improve the performance, efficiency, and sustainability of the transportation system in a holistic way that supports community needs. Again, pausing for feedback.
Wow, nice. Looks great.
I know.
Never mind.
Kaylee's like, dang
Councilmember
it.
Stewart?
Sorry. Just being cognizant of the list, right? So we say performance, efficiency, and sustainability. I think sustainability here can have two different meanings, and it's not clear. One could be that we need a transportation system that is, in and of itself, can be sustained. And then there's sustainability as in environmental sustainability. And so I'm wondering if we can just tweak the wording just a wee bit so that it's clear that I think we do mean both. But here that's not clear, because when you first read it, it kind of feels like we want to make sure we can keep it going, as opposed to it is environmentally sustainable. So something like, you know, I don't know. Again, I won't get into wordsmithing here, but I think it's important that we call out it must be environmentally sustainable and it must be able to be maintained. Maybe. Thanks.
Sounds good. Councilmember Napuri?
I think what I find missing here is that there is definitely a gap. There are just some transportation, maybe like a transit center that we just don't have. And I think this, again, is looking just at the present, saying, okay, we're just going to improve and make efficient our systems that we have right now. But our goal is also to improve these, services, especially during transportation, or make improvements in which we've been lagging. So I would like to capture that essence as well, to see what is our future goal.
Yeah, and I believe the part that was removed would be like the actual details and action for those overall goals, so where we can definitely be like multimodal or everything else.
The word, in essence, Mike and I talked about this quite a bit, the word holistic is intended to capture that sort of the whole spectrum of transportation options without making it super wordy. Again, with the goal, recognizing, not unlike the housing piece, that this is going to come up in a big way. And as you saw earlier this evening, as part of the comp plan process as well, same deal. Work is going on right now. You're going to get some updates on this stuff in the next month or so on some of the work that's going on. And so if that word doesn't work or is not descriptive enough, we can certainly try to add a few words to get at that notion, council member. But that's what we're driving with that, is to say that it should include, or that we should be looking at our entire transportation system in a holistic way, rather than just about individual components of it.
Great, thank you.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end. Appreciate all of the great feedback this evening. So As mentioned a few times, we're going to take your feedback, use it to update the goal statements, and bring it back on October 4th. And if council's ready on the 4th, we'll have a resolution ready to go where you can approve the resolution, thereby approving the goals. And if you do think of any additional feedback that you weren't able to share tonight, please do feel free to email Scott and myself, and we'll make sure to capture that and wrap it in to the revised statements. And then also, as mentioned earlier, we will send out some homework over the coming weeks to collect additional input on the desired actions piece of this. And so there'll be more to come on the actions. And with all that, I will go ahead and turn it back over to the mayor.
Great. Thanks so much, Mike. Okay, we are on to council reports. Deputy Mayor Lamb.
Last week, I went to a great talk hosted by Eastside for All in the city of Redmond called Just Sustainabilities, Planning for a Just, Sustainable, and Inclusive Communities. The keynote speaker was a professor, Julian Aguman, who teaches at Tufts University, and he spoke at length about how environmental sustainability intersects with social justice, and how to, that we should, as policymakers, that we should really keep equity in mind and at the forefront of all our decisions. I included a link of the event, which is at the very bottom of the page, so I would encourage people to take a look at it. I actually learned quite a bit and had a couple of sort of aha moments, I guess. Thanks.
Councilmember Treen.
Yeah, it's pretty lengthy, but I supplied it, so if you have any questions, you can let me know. But I'd like to just highlight the PIC meeting. We as a council will need to come back with, city manager, we should work on our legislative agenda and get that to Councilmember Lamb for the next PIC meeting, so she could report that back to the PIC committee. If you're interested in serving on one of the boards or commissions for SCA, they've been pushing that out to us in announcements, so definitely take a look at that. That should be in your inbox from Leah. And then the other issue that was discussed at the meeting was about a new airport. And so there was concern of our southern city neighbors, Auburn, Black Diamond, Maple Valley, and a couple others, that King County is not to get the next airport and they don't want it in their backyard, and that we should support them in that endeavor. I personally agree with that, but that's the first time I've said anything to anyone about it. But my thought was that it probably should be down in an Olympia area, but that's a big project that's being decided regionally, so just take a watch for that. There's a lot of upcoming events, but the biggest, the event with the Kokanee Work Group, there's going to be the salmon fry release. I've been invited to speak at the release of the salmon fry, and so that's on 10/12 at 5 p.m. I gave a bunch of information on the event. I would like to, if it's all right with the council, I'd like to work with city manager and staff to get a little 2-minute speech put together. And personally, my first initial thought when asked to do this was honored, obviously, and then the other was my prior relationship with the former chief of the tribe who passed away. I'd like to at least make some recognition of the work that he did to have this move forward, and then also maybe some of the other people who've been involved with trying to save little redfish. So if anybody has any objections to that, let me know, but I'd like to represent the city in that way. And then the fun run, or the run that Trout Unlimited's going to do. And I noticed that came to me, and I sent one out to Councilman O'Farrell, but if you don't have the information on the run on, when is that? That's Saturday, October 15th. I can email that out to the full council. All right. Yeah, I'll do that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for having the paper stuff done, both of you, like for the packet. That's super helpful. Deputy Mayor Lamb?
I wanted to follow up on the legislative priorities, and the next PIC meeting is 1 month from now, and I doubt that we'll have our legislative priorities set by then, so perhaps the city manager could give us a timeline or work or somehow come up with a timeline for us.
Councilmember Stewart?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to, kind of re-propose that we put together an ad hoc committee to work with our lobbyists to try to, now that we have a set of council goals, we may be able to move something forward. I know that they're still being wordsmithed, but I think we get the general gist of what those are. So that may help us to be able to move forward on a legislative priority. And then the other thing I'd like to suggest, I know, Mike, in the past, we've done it for the SCA committees and boards, right? We've had an Excel spreadsheet because, again, in case the new council members don't know, if 2 council members from the same city apply to the board, neither of them will be granted a position because SCA is not going to choose between 2 people from the same city. So in the past, we've had an Excel spreadsheet that just lists them all, and then we can all kind of put in which ones we want to see so we can see if more than one person wants a committee, and then we can have a conversation and just pick one of us who's going to apply for it. So if we could do those 2 things, I think that would be great.
Pass over to you, Scott.
If it's time, I was going to jump into the city manager report since all of you gave such a nice bridge about legislative priorities. So Mike and I have chatted about this, and I'd like to turn it over to Mike to what we discussed and what he's going to propose about how we get at that, our legislative priorities for this year.
Thank you, Scott. Good evening once again, Council. Mike Suggs, Senior Management Analyst. So based on the interest that Council had last week in potentially forming a legislative committee, we, as Scott mentioned, just wanted to kind of tell you about how we would see that working out. So to start the process, I think the subcommittee, as Councilmember Stewart mentioned, would meet with staff as well as our contracted lobbyists, Luke Esser and Nick Federici, to sort of look at what are the range of potential items that we could be putting forward as our priorities. And then the subcommittee would sort of debate and discuss and create a recommendation that would go to the full council for consideration. So that could save us some time at council meetings just by having that deliberation take place on the back end and do that deep dive in that way. And then once the finalist is approved by council, then typically what we do is set up meetings with our legislative delegation, and we share our priorities with them, and they can share their priorities with us, and kind of talk about areas where we can collaborate. And just as a reminder, we do have 9 state legislators across 3 legislative districts. So our vision there would be that the subcommittee would then hold those legislative delegation meetings in small groups with the support of our lobbyists, rather than kind of putting everybody in the room at once, as we've done in the past. And that really gets us to the start of the legislative session, and then once the session has started, there's a variety of ways for council to get involved. There's legislative days down in Olympia where you can meet with legislative representatives as well as colleagues from other cities. And then there's always opportunities for if council members want to go down and testify on bills that are in support or against the city's priorities, we can do that. Or we can write letters, things like that. So there's a lot of ways to interact during the session, but kind of leading up to the session, that's kind of how we see it working out if we were to go the subcommittee route. If the subcommittee is not formed, then we'll just do as we have in the past few years, which is bring the topic to the full council for discussion and deliberation. So with that, I'll hand it back over. Scott, has anything to add additional to that, or back to Ed?
Thank you, Mike. I think the only thing that I would add is that if you all chose the subcommittee route, what we would ask of you tonight is to collectively choose those 3 subcommittee members so that we can move forward with all due haste based on the conversation earlier this evening.
I would love a subcommittee. I would not like to be on it, but I would love it. I don't know how people feel. Are those hands for questions or for that you want to be on it? Volunteer, volunteer, volunteer?
There we go.
Oh, and volunteer.
I think we can have just 3, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
only 3.
Rock, paper, scissors, or first 3 that raise their hands? Because I didn't really say. Okay, Councilmember O'Farrell, so kind. All right. Yes, I think we have our 3. Good. You can do it next year. Sure. For the short session. Year after, whatever. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you, Mayor. And with that, the one other thing that, Mike will follow up with the subcommittee members and we'll reach out to our lobbyists and get those set up. I also wanted to follow up on the SCA front that hopefully you all saw the email inviting you to the next SCA event, which I believe is Wednesday the 5th in the evening. I would encourage, again, all of you to go to those events. It's a great way to meet other elected officials around the region and find out what they're doing in their cities. I found this to be very helpful, so I would encourage you all to go if you are available. If you are, let us know, and unless you go last minute, we generally can pre-register you and pay up front so that you're not doing that in the moment. So just let us know if you'd like to attend.
Great, thank you so much. And I believe that brings us to the end, unless anyone else has anything.
We do have an executive session, Mayor.
We have another one?
We do.
It's on the
Oh,
agenda.
okay, I thought that was a typo.
No.
Okay. Okay. All right, so next we have another executive session, sorry, for 15 minutes, pending litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101I. No action is anticipated following this session.
That's correct. Thank
Okay,
you.
9:45. We'll be back.
Council will extend the executive session until 10 p.m. The executive session will be extended until 10 p.m. Thank you.
All right, we are back. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, 7-0, we are adjourned. Thank you so much. Happy birthday, Deputy Mayor Lamb.
Happy birthday! Well done. Well done.